Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone and see such a full room. Thanks very much for coming out. My name is David Parkinson. Until very recently, if you have long memories, until about 3 weeks ago, I was an economics columnist here at the Globe. I'm now the deputy head of newsroom development, a new position, but still working hard to publish good material and contribute to events like this for you guys. So I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that the Globe and Mail's headquarters is located on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis Nation, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. My colleagues and I are grateful that we have the opportunity to work on this land. Canadian business leaders are navigating a time of rapid change and persistent uncertainty. That's nothing that any of you don't already know. It is vital to recalibrate businesses for growth while positioning yourself for new and emerging opportunities. Today's event will focus on different facets of any business that are essential for sustaining success. I'd like to thank and welcome everyone to the room today, as well as the people in our virtual audience who are joining us from across the country. For those of you in the virtual audience, we aren't anticipating any technical issues, but as you know, nobody anticipates technical issues. We hope that they don't happen, but if they do, we appreciate your patience while we address those, if any arise. If you do need technical help, there is a button, an icon called the Help Desk, at the bottom of your screen, so just click that in the virtual audience if you do incur any problems. I'd also like to thank MNP. They are our presenting sponsor, and we'd like to thank them for making this summit possible. We want you all to have a chance to connect with your fellow business owners while you're here today, as well as today's speakers, through questions and discussions. For our virtual audience, you can submit questions using the virtual Q&A box. For those in the room, we encourage you to ask questions not only of our onstage experts, but also your peers in the room during the day. On that note, we are going to take 60 seconds right now for each person in the room to just turn to the people next to you and across the table from you and quickly let them know a little bit about yourselves if you haven't done that already. And you can talk a little bit more if you like, but we've got 60 seconds to introduce yourselves, and I will be returning to the stage in a few minutes for our first on-stage interview session. But first, I would like to welcome to the stage Tanya Knight. She is the Executive Vice President of Clients and Services at our sponsor, MNP. Tanya?
Good morning, everyone. Well, thanks for being here today. As David said, my name is Tanya Knight. I'm a partner with MNP and the Executive Vice President of Clients and Services. We are so excited to be the presenting sponsors of this event, and I know we have a lineup of very insightful speakers and workshops yet to come that are going to leave you hopefully with some strategies and some useful information and valuable connections to take away with you. I'd like to take a moment to extend a warm thank you to the Globe and Mail for hosting us today and providing us with this beautiful venue and these breathtaking views of the Toronto skyline. Saskatoon's home for me, so it definitely looks a little different out the window here. Today's Business Owners Summit will focus on what growth looks like in this new and complicated economy we're all operating in. No industry has been immune from the challenges of the last 3 years, and the unprecedented nature of current economic turbulence means everyone needs a robust and flexible approach when positioning their business for growth. While this approach will be unique in each organization, the tools and strategies we'll discuss today will hopefully leave you inspired to examine your operations from a different perspective, digging deep into what long-term success looks like for each of you. Resiliency is a buzzword I'm sure each of you are very familiar with, but it likely is of great importance to you, otherwise you wouldn't be here today. Businesses that plan for and practice resiliency know how to adapt to changing market conditions. They're agile, they're open to change, ahead of the competition, and embrace the importance of creating an organization-wide culture of learning and adaptability. In the more than 2 decades I've been with M&P, I've seen our firm grow from 371 team members to over 8,000 team members today. Thank you. Now, we've gone from a handful of offices in the Prairie Provinces to 120 offices across Canada. In that time and through that growth, establishing a culture of growth and resiliency for our business was also critical, and working with our clients on these same strategies has become the foundation for growth at M&P. As we serve our private enterprise clients across the country, we recognize how important it is to be on top of the issues and the solutions that matter to business leaders like all of you. It's so vital to the work we do that in addition to the deep relationships we create with our clients, we've also created the Business Resiliency Playbook, a bit of a hub of insights related to current and ongoing challenges that you're facing that help you deliver strategies or insights to help you overcome all of these challenges. It's resources like this and many others that give businesses a broad look at specific scenarios they've either already experienced or may have to address in the months and years to come. Changing systems and regulations mean this kind of work has to be malleable and versatile, and it's our goal today to provide you with some of the knowledge needed to embark on this journey with confidence. In our breakout sessions, we're going to hear from some of Canada's most successful business leaders who know a thing or two about what it means to be resilient in the face of economic adversity. From financial strategy and digital transformation to regulatory compliance, and many more in between, our discussions today will hone in on how you can navigate this complex business environment and create room for growth. As I'm sure you'll hear from our speakers today, there isn't one magic elixir that will solve all of our problems, but with the desire to grow and change, and with the right advice and support, you can leverage adversity into opportunity. Preparing for the unpredictable may seem an impossible task, but I can assure you, with a bit of foresight, some thoughtful planning, and a little bit of elbow grease, you can manage what is yet to come with balance and dexterity. For those of you in person, we'll end the day with an opportunity for networking, and I would love to connect with each of you personally to understand a little bit more about your business and the opportunities and challenges that each of you see. We'll be heading into breakout sessions later this morning, but first I'd like to welcome back to the stage David Parkinson. So please enjoy the events of today, and I really look forward to connecting with each of you and learning more about your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Now for our first discussion, we want to focus on the big picture that faces all of you. That's the economy, something we all deal with, whether we're homeowners, business owners, employers, employees, something that affects all of us. And more specifically, we want to talk about how the changing economic currents pose both challenges and opportunities for mid-market business leaders. And we'd like to welcome to the stage somebody who, in my professional capacity, I've been talking to for several years and thoroughly enjoy talking to them. When you're an economics reporter or columnist, there are certain people that you get to know in the country who not only are experts in their fields, but have a way of communicating with you that raises questions you never thought of, that give you an understanding of the issues that really raises the bar for you and allows you to share those with your readers. And when you're really in a pinch, when you really need somebody where you're not sure what's going on, and you need to find that voice that will put it in a way that makes it clear for you and for your readers, there's just some people you turn to, and this gentleman is definitely one of those people, and has been a joy for me to be able to talk to over the last several years. So if you could welcome to the stage with me Scotiabank's Vice President and Chief Economist, Jean-Francois Perrault. Well, JF, it's a pleasure to, just my chair, but a pleasure to be up here with you again. I know we did something like this before, and it's great to have a chance to do it again. So thanks for coming out and doing this.
Pleasure. I hope I can live up to all the very nice things you said.
Well, we're counting on it now. I mean, we've said nice things about you. Now you gotta prove it. We are at something of a pivotal point entering 2024 in a lot of economic aspects, and there's substantial uncertainty around a lot of issues. We're still looking at a lot at inflation and interest rates, and they may be at a turning point. Where there's still the question of whether we are or are not heading into a recession. We're in the midst of a green transition, and there's evolving policies around all of that. We've got big elections coming up, certainly in the US, potentially in this country as well. There may be a mood out there that this is a time for businesses to batten down the hatches, to play it defensively, be cautious, not stick your neck out too much. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think the best way to respond to that is to go to this time last year. Because a lot of those concerns, except for the US election, were front and center when folks thought about what was to come in 2023. So if you'll recall, at the time, interest rates had gone up a lot in both countries, Canada and the US. There was a concern that that was going to lead to recession. So the dominant narrative going into 2023 on both sides of the border was, is there going to be a recession? How bad is it going to be? Now, we weren't in that camp, but there was a lot of folks thinking that was going to be the case. So as a result of that, you had growth forecasts in Canada for about 0.5 percentage point, and in the US for about 0.5 percentage point for 2023. So businesses were thinking, this is going to be a rough year. I got to think about my plans a little bit differently. And as it turns out, growth in Canada was twice what we'd expected last year, and growth in the US was 5 times what we'd expected last year. So not only did we not see a recession, but we saw a much more resilient economy than anybody thought possible, including the Bank of Canada. So we head into this year with a little bit of that history, like understanding why we did better last year than we thought, gives you a sense of direction as to how pessimistic or optimistic you should be about 2024. And our sense is that, obviously the economy is slowing. There's no question about that. Rates are at 5%. That is working through the economy, and I'm sure most of you feel that. But the sense of pessimism that's kind of pulled us down for last 18 months or so, to us is a little bit overblown. We're thinking the economy is landing reasonably softly. That is to say, we've gone through a couple of quarters of flattish growth, ostensibly due to special factors like strikes and port strikes and public sector strikes and wildfires and a whole bunch of things that kind of really jumbled the economic picture. But this underlying notion that households, for instance, are more resilient than we'd appreciate it is still definitely the case. This underlying notion that there's still some oomph, if you will, on the household spending side, despite survey measures which are horrible when you poll households and ask them how you think about the world. Even from a small business perspective, when you look at the CFIB survey, the business barometer, and you ask businesses what are the things that are holding back growth in their in their opinion, the number one thing still is shortage of skilled labor, as opposed to other kind of factors such as weakness in demand. Now, weakness in demand is coming up, but businesses are still in a world where their main challenge is we got to find more people. So you put all that together, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a sense that maybe we're kind of overly pessimistic going into the year. Not that we're expecting strong growth by any stretch of the imagination. We're again expecting 0.5 percentage point. But there's, I think, a little bit more cautious optimism now that we see, A, how we've responded over last year, but B, the rate cuts are kind of in the window. And I think that provides folks with a lot of comfort about the way forward if, in fact, those rate cuts do occur.
Yeah, and as you said, with 2023 having been a stronger year than people had thought or feared, if you held off making capital investments in 2023, you're now looking up and saying, well, okay, so I may have suffered from a productivity standpoint, and I've suffered from an opportunity standpoint. There was growth that I didn't capture because I held off. So I guess what sort of looking, as you said, we've got some of the same things now, but if somebody's trying to decide whether to make a major capital investment, caution isn't always, can be overblown, can't it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you have to think of periods of economic weakness as opportunities. There's no question about it, right? Not only in terms of, some competitors are going to go bankrupt, and we've seen that pick up a little bit, not dramatically so, but roughly back to where they were pre-pandemic. You're going to see some competitors not willing to pursue opportunities that they otherwise would run after because they're worried about the outlook, perhaps more than they should be, perhaps more than you are. So firms that are well capitalized, kind of very strategic about opportunities, that aren't too worried about the risky environment. You got to be cautious, of course, but not to the exclusion of kind of foregoing on these opportunities. Firms that have done that over the last couple of years benefited tremendously. Now we're getting to a point where optimism is starting to pick up a little bit. People are a little bit more optimistic. So there's a sense I think out there that the cohort of businesses that are struggling or that might be less aggressive in pursuing opportunities is probably lower now than it would have been 6 months ago. But there's still plenty of those folks out there. There still is a lot of worries. These views that the economy is landing softly, that the kind of rates are going to save us, that hasn't happened yet. Like it's kind of an expectation. So you have people that are still very worried about what's to come. And it still is, in our mind, a good time for firms to think aggressively about opportunities. Yeah. Being smart about it, but not kind of closing your mind and closing your eyes and hoping that things are going to pass, and then you'll come back and re-engage in the second half of this year when hopefully your rates are lower and people are more engaged.
So you've talked a couple of times already about interest rates. So we've been watching them a lot the last almost 2 full years since the Bank of Canada started raising rates. And there has been increased talk of rate cuts, expectations of rate cuts this year. The Bank of Canada just made a rate announcement last week, held steady, but the tone changed a bit, didn't it? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about that tone change and what it might be signaling in terms of what the bank is and what your expectations are for rates this year.
So it seems pretty clear that we're at the tail end of the rate tightening cycle. And in fact, the governor kind of said that at the last meeting. Said we're no longer thinking about whether we need to raise rates further, but it's more a question of when do rates start to get cut. And there are two kind of big challenges from the Bank of Canada's perspective on that front. On the one hand, we know the economy is slowing. 5% hurts, of course, and they've acknowledged that. But that's working as intended. So finally, the economy is working, slowing and reflecting the pace of rate increases that we've seen. So they're very comfortable about that. And the governor's basically said, in not so many words, like this is good news. Like things are finally moving in the direction that we want them to. The flip side is the inflation picture is getting worse in some sense. So not total inflation, which is the inflation that people tend to think about, when you look at underlying measures of inflation. So median inflation, trim means, core measures of inflation, they're still strong. Bank of Canada targets 2%, and those measures are in the 3.5%, 4% range. They've actually accelerated to around the 4% range in the December report. So they're kind of stuck between this world of, okay, we like what's going on the growth side, and that should bring inflation down eventually, but inflation's not going down yet. So he's got to be very cautious about what he says. And you see that in his communications. He does talk about kind of balancing these risks. He talks about how he's got less tolerance for higher inflation than lower inflation, and that he might need to do something about that. So the question very much is not so much one of, are they going to have to raise rates again, but their expectations right now, for instance, that rates start to get around the middle of the year. And whether that's the right time for those rate cuts to begin and how much they'll cut afterwards. And you're not going to get any clarity from him on that. Right? Part of his challenge is he knows that people want rates to go down. We all want rates to go down. He knows, for instance, that the housing market is critically dependent on those rates going down. And in fact, what we saw in the month of December is a pickup in the housing market that was pretty substantial because mortgage rates have started to come down because long-term interest rates have come down. So he's very sensitive to, if I tell people our rates are going to go down on whatever date, I'm going to get a re-acceleration of the housing market at a time when I don't want the economy to pick up yet. So you're not, if you're looking to the governor at some point saying, listen, the governor's going to tell me roughly when rates are going to move, he's not going to do that. He can't do that because if he does that, he imperils his ability to move because everybody will respond in kind.
So, and I think sometimes we get obsessed with the notion, certainly the market is very focused on when, on the timing of the first cut. But I guess, from a standpoint of investment decisions, maybe it matters more to think about not so much is it going to be spring or June or July, but how far are we going to go over the next, once those cuts start, how deep are they going to be? Is that maybe a more important question in terms of investment
decisions? For businesses, 100%. For financial market folks, no. Financial market folks will make a bet on, okay, rates are going to move in June, they're going to move in May, April, whatever day, they're going to pick a date, and they'll make bets on that. For business, it's a different story, right? Whether the rate moves in June versus a couple months earlier, a couple months later, is not really all that significant. What matters is, A, that you've got a sense that rates have peaked, so that you know that you don't have to worry about higher borrowing costs going forward. So it's a relief to some extent. But then, the confidence that, yeah, rates are going to go down at some point, probably by a lot over a space of a couple years, and that will provide a tremendous amount of relief for the economy. And at the same time, those rate cuts are going to lead to pretty rapid pickup in economic activity as people kind of react to lower interest rates. So that's, I think, the overriding narrative from my perspective, from a business perspective, is, not so much worry about when rates get cut, but the fact that it's pretty clear they are going to get cut, and we've kind of hitting the release valve for the economy sometime this year. Yeah. Middle of the year, a little bit later, we'll see.
And when you say rates are going to be cut a lot over the next 2 years, where do you think we'll be 12 months from now, 24 months from now?
Well, listen, you're talking rates are at 5% right now, maybe 3 by the end of 2025, and then close to what we consider to be a neutral rate of interest sometime beyond that, so 2.5%, 3%. So you're looking at a couple hundred basis points of cuts between now and, say, the end of next year. Now, whether that's 100 this year and 100 next year, we'll see. That's what we think. But that's kind of the order of magnitude that we're thinking about. And that the order of magnitude the governor will be thinking about as well, because he's talking about normalizing policy. Normalizing policy means you bring rates down to 2.5, 3.
So one of the questions I get asked a lot, I'm absolutely certain you do, is a recession. Are we going to have a recession? Aren't we going to have a recession? What's it going to look like? How deep is it going to be? When are we going to slip into a recession? Are we already in a recession? Does that actual question about whether we call it a recession, whether it's actually we're formally in a recession, does that really matter, or are these the wrong questions? Are there other issues we should be looking at in terms of what's really going on in a quote unquote recession? Are we asking the wrong question, basically?
Well, yes and no. People worry. So if you tell them that we're in a recession, I think they behave differently than if you say, listen, we're going to grow slow down. The numbers are the same, but it's a recession versus not a recession. I think there's a meaning attached to that word that I think scares people into behaving differently than if you were to say, same growth forecast, but you don't call it a recession. It seems at this point difficult for us to see a recession occurring. Again, the weak part of the economy, or the part that's supposed to be the weakest, which is consumer spending, which is why the Bank has been raising interest rates. As we look to the end of last year, we saw a pretty significant pickup in retail sales in the month of December. We saw auto sales pick up. We saw the housing market pick up. So there's that resilience I spoke about earlier is really kind of foundational to whether or not the economy trips over into a recession. So there's signs of optimism there. The big thing with a recession is, kind of this definitional issue. There's two ways to think about it. There's a shortcut that people use, which is 2 quarters of negative growth, 2 quarters of decline. We might have that. We had a negative in Q3. We might have a negative in Q4, but that's, as I said, a 500,000 person public sector strike in Quebec, the Vancouver port strike. There's things and wildfire, things that kind of kept you down that might generate 2 quarters of decline, but they're not. That's not real. That's just stuff that happened that is influencing the economy from which we'll rebound. A real recession is kind of a broad-based decline in economic activity, large pickup in unemployment, pain that's broadly felt. And right now, we're not really seeing that. I know people are hoping for things to be better, but there's a difference between that and being disappointed with your prospects rather than everybody pulling back in any meaningful way. And that's just not the case right now. What you need for that to happen is obviously businesses pulling back dramatically on spending, which we're not seeing, broad-based, and you need a significant pickup in unemployment. But not a pickup in the number of people that are unemployed specifically, but a pickup in the number of people who are fired. Because what we've seen in Canada, for instance, over last year, there's been an increase in the unemployment rate, pretty significant. December 2022, the unemployment was 5, it's 5.8 now. So reasonable increase in unemployment rate. You can say that's maybe a sign of a recession. Challenge with that is we created 430,000 jobs over that period of time. It's just that immigration was so strong that people were coming into the country looking for jobs. So you had an increase in the number of unemployed, but it wasn't really because firms were laying people off. They were hiring aggressively, just weren't hiring aggressively enough to absorb everybody that was coming in. And that, that remains kind of this theme of businesses will complain about labor shortages, right? Coming back to the CFIB survey. We've been worried about a recession, talking about it for almost a couple years. And still to this point, the number one challenge, number one concern from a kind of sales growth perspective is I don't have the workers that I need. Over I'm worried about the environment.
Yeah, and you still look at the level of vacancies, and they have come down from extremes, but we still have very healthy levels of vacancies.
Listen, vacancies are higher than they were pre-pandemic, just marginally so now, But
We're talking about labor vacancies.
Yes. Pre-pandemic labor vacancies were high, so it's not like even going back to pre-pandemic levels is a comforting level. And what you're seeing on the labor market front confirms that firms are still in hiring mode. I mean, wages are going up, depending on the measure you're looking at, 4, 5, 6%. Right? So very strong wage growth still, and that's indicative of this pressure on the labor market that firms are still looking for people and not shedding labor yet. So that makes it very difficult to argue they're going to have a big recession when businesses are behaving the way they are on the labor front.
So I wanted to ask you about the green transition. It's obviously something that's on the minds of a lot of business leaders and a lot of policymakers as well. And one of the things that we hear a lot is whether we're falling behind the curve, whether 2024 might even be a make or break year for policymakers, for the private sector as well, to get their ducks in a row and get ourselves well set to capture this opportunity, or whether we slip up and miss the boat. Is that a real danger that from a policy standpoint, from a private sector investment standpoint, that we've got a generational opportunity here and we've got to be on the ball?
I think so. But I'll caveat that in a second. I mean, listen, if you think about one of the big challenges we're facing as a country, it's productivity growth, and productivity has been horrible. And partly productivity has been horrible because investments are extremely low. So, the transition requires firms to retool and invest in a way that they haven't done so before. So there's an optimism there that's associated with, maybe by forcing firms to transition against their will in a lot of cases, you're effectively forcing a technological upgrade on the part of companies. And that's beneficial in many ways, not just from a transition perspective. I'd say the challenge is, for firms to undertake kind of the investments that are required in the transition space, understanding there's lots of government assistance for certain types of firms, is you need certainty about the environment that you're going to be operating in the next number of years. And there it becomes much more tricky, right? You have the conservatives in Canada who say, they're going to axe the tax, so kind of imparting some uncertainty as to whether or not, what kind of a green policy you're going to be following in the next government. And when you're thinking about investments that you've got to make in your company to make that happen, if you're not sure what the world is going to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, it's a bit of a challenge. And then, of course, then there's the U.S. election where if President Trump wins, he's basically said, forget it, we're not doing anything on the green side. It's drill, drill, drill. And that also is going to create a tremendous amount of challenge in thinking about how to invest in that space. So I don't think we're missing the boat. I think the seas are going to be pretty choppy for the next couple of years in terms of what signals governments are sending in terms of what we need to do from a business perspective transition, and how much appetite or desire there's going to be on their part to see us do what we need to do to make that happen.
So we did say off the top that we would have opportunities for questions, and my clock is running out here, but I've got time for one before we move on, and that's the first hand I saw over there. We do have someone in the room with a microphone that we can get a question here before we move on to the next session. We'll be with you, and just hang on for a second. We'll get you a microphone so the room and the people who are with us virtually can hear you.
Monty McMurchie. Interesting. My query, question, comment is what I call the opaqueness, notwithstanding how interconnected society is. And who does make the choice? And I respect what you are saying, but who is an absolute clairvoyant? Judgment matters. And the people that are paid the highest amount of compensation are those that are able to predict, grounded within an ethos of sagacity, grounded in evidence. So what say you in terms of the future vis-a-vis our interconnectedness? Because we are a small country. We are led by small people. And we are agnostically entailed by the people to the south who are, shall we say, a little more fervent in their political publics. Thank you.
Well,
yes.
Yes, 100%. I agree. Listen, I mean, the challenge. So, the challenge that there are a number of kind of bigger picture challenges in the global economy. Obviously, one of those is reshoring. Part of it is the green transition. Part of it is concerns coming out of the Russia-Ukraine war and kind of relying on China for a whole bunch of things. Some of that is coming out of the COVID area, COVID pandemic, and kind of supply chain disruptions. So there's this move to kind of de-engineer to some extent, the linkages that we created over a number of decades to try and kind of maximize availability of choice for households and lower cost for business and all those kinds of things. And we're at a point now where that is, that is being re-engineered very aggressively in the United States. All right, so they are very aggressive in the friendshoring, quote unquote, friendshoring world. They're very aggressive in terms of using fiscal policy to attract investments into the US. So for instance, manufacturing investment in the US in the summer was 80% higher than it was the year before. So a boom in manufacturing spending because the government there is extremely aggressive in kind of getting companies to increase capacity there from a quote unquote green perspective, but it's basically industrial policy. So we're going into a world where industrial policy is the driver of a lot of what we're going to be experiencing. And that's not something governments have really any experience in over the last, certainly North American governments, the last 30 years. So that's a big challenge, right? You've got governments who are basically kind of forced to pick winners to some extent, and we're seeing that in Canada in terms of how we're using some of the subsidies to support the green transition. But there is a big risk that we screw that up. That either we get offside of the Americans on something, which is very possible in the Trump world if he wins, or that we're throwing billions and billions and billions of dollars away in terms of pursuing competitive opportunities with respect to the US, again, in the battery space largely. That might not be the right things to do 5 years from now. It requires to some extent a crystal ball on the part of governments who are kind of doing this. And there's nothing crystal about that ball. I think it's pretty opaque. And as a result of that, you've got governments that are doing things to try and look like they're being proactive and thinking they're proactive, but I'm not sure we're getting it right. Like, for instance, do we think that, I don't know what the eventual tally is going to be on the support for the battery plants and all those kinds of things, but $5, $6, $10 billion a year, like that's not inconceivable. Like, if the governments are going to be giving $5 or $10 billion a year to industries to develop and be innovative and be creative, like, is that the best way to do it? So there's a challenge with these decisions that kind of forces you to go down a path, and you become path dependent that maybe crowds out other opportunities that might, 2 years from now, be far more interesting than what we're doing now. It's not to complain about what's been done, but when you're spending billions of dollars without really thinking about what else can I do with that money, then it's always a challenge.
Well, JF, if this was the Academy Awards, they would have been playing us off the stage a few minutes ago. We're already in bonus time, so thanks everybody. I'm glad you were engaged enough for me to get in trouble with our organizers by running a little bit over. But so I hope you would all join me in thanking JF Perot for his comments.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first breakout session of the day. Thanks for staying with us. Everybody is so spread out now that we're up here. My name is Chris Hannay. I'm a reporter in business in the Report on Business. My beat is small and medium-sized businesses. So my title is Independent Business Reporter. I am joined here today with our guest, Sterling Wong, the founder and CEO of Leads on Demand Search Realty. Do you want to say hi?
Hi, good morning, Globe and Mail attendees. My name is Sterling Wong. I'm the founder and CEO of Search Realty and Leads on Demand. I come with a track record of pioneering digital strategies in industries such as real estate, mortgages, and internet marketing. I started my first 3 companies in 2012 with 1 agent. Today we're over 400 agents and over 20 million in sales. And I am thrilled to share my insights on digital transformation and the future of lead generation.
Awesome, thank you. So the session today will be about strategies for mid-market businesses to take to ensure digital readiness. So this is a breakout session, although we're in a very big room. So I'm hoping this will be a little bit more of like a workshop interactive discussion than just us talking at you. That's my hope. So if you have questions as we're going on, we're gonna cover a few different topics as we go. And if you have questions as we go on, please raise your hand and we'll try to get a microphone to you. And then at the end, we will have a dedicated Q&A session. So yes, as we go on, if you have questions, please ask them so that we can have a bit more of a dialogue. So hopefully it's more helpful for people. Great. Okay, so Yeah, to kick things off, well, just to go back to a little bit to your background, Sterling. Can you tell us a bit about your origin story and how you transformed the process of generating leads for realtors?
Yeah, sure. So I started my career with being a traditional real estate agent, and I didn't have capital or a big Rolodex to solicit the traditional way. So the only economic way I could generate new business is through Google. So I studied the webmaster algorithms. I became, number 1, 2, 3, the full 10 results on Google. I want every single result to be my website. So essentially taking an archaic industry, layering it with systems, technology, automation, and of course Google lead generation. And that's how essentially I got started.
Interesting. Okay. So like I said, we're going to cover a few different topics. And so one of the first ones we're going to cover is talk about the Canada Digital Adoption Program. This is the federal government's big initiative that it announced a couple years ago. Or I guess it announced it like 3 years ago and then actually rolled it out 2 years ago. And it's been budgeted at $4 billion. There's mini grants, loans, a whole menu of things. I guess just by show of hands, how many people have heard about the Canada Digital Adoption Program? Okay. How many people have actually gone through the process or started to go through it? Okay, so a few. Yeah, so Sterling, you mentioned that you as a business owner went through the program. So can you talk a bit about it, your experience?
Yes, yeah. So I found the process very easy to apply. There's just a couple of clicks. You have to pick a digital advisor from their pool of approved vendors. So depending on what you want to get accomplished, you select your vendor, whether it's marketing or IT, and then they will create an assessment, a digital assessment and layout, and then you send that in when you apply for the application, and then you get the grant. I think it's roughly $15,000.
So one of the streams of the Canada Digital Adoption Program is that the government will provide up to $15,000 for a business to hire somebody to essentially help them with their digital adoption strategy, to develop a plan, and then possibly they can use that plan to then get a loan.
Exactly. Yeah, so once you have the plan, you can apply for $50,000 or $100,000 depending on how much you have in sales. And I know that there's been some companies that had some issues getting approved. So I think the main obstacle that I heard was just getting your financials right down to the dollar when you're applying. I think that's the major reason for the declines.
Like in terms of the financial statements you're submitting to the government?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you apply for the loan.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And did you apply for a loan?
Yes, yeah, I did the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. How was your experience with the loan?
It was good, yeah, quick and easy. It's quick and easy money, everyone. Might as well take advantage.
You just have to go through a few steps first before you get it.
Yeah, small hoops.
So I know when I've talked to small business owners and even some of these advisors, so one of the crucial stages here is that in order to get that $15,000 to develop a plan, you have a whole pool of people saying that they can help transform your business. And it may be hard to judge whether those people actually know what they're talking about because there's a lot of them. So do you have any advice for people who are maybe starting this process, who are trying to decide who do I actually trust to help me with my business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did the whole thing. I just have a lot of Windows tabs open in Chrome and just have them all laid out and just do Google searches and look for the best reviews and depends on what you're looking for really. I think the idea of the digital transformation is during the pandemic there was some companies that just weren't set up to have their staff work offline. I think that might be a good first step. Looking out for an IT company to take your systems offline so everybody can work from home. But yeah, I would say Google reviews and asking for testimonials and things like that.
On the Canada Digital Adoption Program, were there anyone who's has had questions about it? Oh, no. Someone was just waving as I asked that. Question here. Can we get a microphone?
Hi, Sue Penny, Price Check. I just before you apply for the loan, can you meet with these people first to sort of figure out who is going to be the right one for you, or like is that part of the program, or do you just do that on your own initiative?
Yeah, you kind of do that on your own. I went all across Canada. I didn't just stick around the GTA. So I found my guy. I think he was in Alberta. We did a Zoom call and seen, if it was a right fit or not. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, was there anybody else maybe who's been through the program who had any feedback or any suggestions for anybody else? Something they wanted to share?
Self-serving comment, MNP is one on that list. We've gone through a lot of these, and one of the questions that we hear a lot from our clients is understanding the program, understanding what the strategy is intended for, and then how can they use the investment afterwards. And the focus is around how do you use the investment to the best advantage. But it's been a great program for many of our clients. So.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess one of the things why I wanted to bring it up in this discussion was that the government's devoted $4 billion to this, and some of the business owners I've talked to have generally had positive things to say about it, but the uptake has been so far very low. And so there is an awareness issue of people not knowing about the program, but also there are steps involved, and it can seem like a bit of a hurdle, and so people might not want to go through with it. But yeah, it sounds like it works for people who go through it.
I'm not sure why it's easier than applying for a mortgage. So I'm not sure why the stumbling block there, but yeah, no, you just follow the prompts, very easy.
All right. Yeah, so moving on. Wanted to talk about digital marketing. So digital marketing also seems like one of those things that there's a lot of people who give advice about it, a lot of people who work in it, and it can be hard to figure out like what the ROI is, like what is actually working with digital marketing. So for people kind of approaching it, how do you kind of start thinking about a digital marketing strategy and what would actually work?
Yeah, I would beg to differ with regards to tracking it. That's one of the beauties of digital marketing is you're able to track everything right down to graphs and be able to predict the output. I think one area of digital marketing that is hard to track is social media. Depending on your industry, real estate and mortgages is very hyper-local. So having that follower in Miami is not going to do much for us. But if I'm selling shoes, that follower is great for us. We could ship out a pair of shoes in Miami. So depending on your industry and how you plan to leverage social media, that's the only part where I'd say that's a little bit tricky to track. But Google AdWords, you could track everything there.
Mm-hmm. So what are some pieces of advice you might give for somebody who's approaching you for the first time?
Right. So I think if you haven't found a website yet, I find this is a common mistake when businesses look for a website, a URL, domain name. Try to have your market contained in the domain. So if you're selling furniture, have it somewhere, furniture for sale. The reason being is because Google crawlbot is like a human. So when it's crawling the URL, it's going to know you're selling furniture. But if it's bobsmith.com, it's not going to inherently know that you're selling furniture. It's going to have to read the text. And this is going to save you thousands in your SEO strategy and your SEM strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like a Google optimized business name would be like Furniture Sales Edmonton.
That's probably taken.
I'm sure someone has that. I'm not looking it up. Well, let's continue on that. So search engine optimization, SEO. Obviously this is critical because so many customers find businesses and search engines, which is, when we're talking about search engines, we're mostly talking about Google since they have like 90% of the market. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's evolved a lot over time as people have there's more and more businesses competing for this audience, trying more strategies, getting more aggressive. and maybe also you're competing against businesses that aren't really real. That can happen as well. So what do you kind of see as like the fundamentals of SEO right now?
I think for small to medium-sized businesses, just focus on the Google Maps portion. That's going to be your easiest. When you get into playing with the big guys, it's going to be a lot difficult to get to the top 3 results. The top 3 results is really where you get the business. 4 or 5, you're not going to get much business there. So I would suggest focusing on the paid clicks, the pay per click through Google AdWords. Get the business immediately, and then the SEO would be the long-term strategy after you've developed some revenue. You have a little bit to throw in there.
So what helps on Google Maps?
Google Maps is, you need a physical address. They need to verify that you do. Before it was just a couple of clicks to verify, but now they actually send the mail out and they give you a code. So they do make sure that you are a physical entity. And the other factor is reviews. So if you have a lot of reviews are gold right now. So if you could get as many reviews as possible, that's going to increase your rankings on the Google Maps there.
Do you have strategies for how to get more reviews?
After you close a sale, ask for it. So it could be we have it on an automated email system where the subject title's huge favor. I need to ask for a huge favor, and then we're just asking to leave a review. Make it easy for them, just a click, and then they can leave a review. Our system, they can leave a review on Google or Facebook or Better Business Bureau or Yelp. Anywhere online to increase your online reputation is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I feel like it can be tough there for reviews because or if you're just relying on organic customer reviews, I feel like they're probably more likely to be negative because those will be the people who will be outraged enough to want to leave a review. Whereas you have to maybe work a little harder just to get your happy customers to leave reviews.
Yeah, no, we're fortunate. We have over 800 5-star reviews. But yeah, you will get the odd person. I find that the ones that are leaving us 1-star reviews are not our customer. They're competitors, but they'll get drowned out if you have enough 5-star reviews. But yeah, I think just asking, because it's like you said, it's tricky for a customer to go out of their way to leave the review. I've seen, if you have a physical store, I've seen taps, like you could tap on the phone and then it opens up the review for $99. That's, it's a good deal for that. But yeah, you'd have to ask for it in some shape or form.
Interesting. Do we have questions about SEO? Maybe just to your, we'll start with you.
About SEO, there's this new, I wanted your opinion on the new Performance Max tool that Google is trying to leverage more, which has more, all the tools coming in together with the AI. What has your experience been in terms of, propping up the efforts for SEO on that? Because it seems to be quite a good deal when it all comes down together and all the tools coming together in the Google platform. So what has been your experience with Performance Max? It's relatively not that old, so.
Yeah, the Performance Max, I have mixed reviews on that because they consolidate all the different ads in one, and you're getting this traffic, and you can't. They don't tell you where you're getting the traffic from. So you see this big bill that comes in, and you don't know where the traffic came from, and so the transparency is lost there. So I'm not quite a big fan of that, but some may say it's a money grab. But
I'm sorry, I'm not actually familiar with this. Is this part of AdWords?
AdWords, yeah, it's one of their new products that they have, and it just basically uses AI and all the different type of ad formats that they have. It's all consolidated, and it's supposed to follow the customer. So if they're on Google.ca, they type in furniture, homes for sale, or furniture for sale, whatever. They click on your site, but they don't do anything, and now they're on a weight loss website. It'll follow you on the weight loss website, and then all throughout different avenues, it's going to follow you until that customer actions, buys something. But it just the transparency wasn't there, so I didn't follow through with that because I got a big bill and the conversions weren't all there, and then when I went to go backwards, okay, where did these clicks come from? Nobody knows.
Yep.
Do you pay a monthly fee to Google to be in the top 3 listings, or is that naturalized by the keywords you use?
Well, they go by something called ad rank, and that ultimately depends how much you're going to pay per click. But I always tell our customers that you could spend $50 a month, or you can spend $5 million a month on AdWords. So it's more leads, more. It depends on what your goal is. If it's brand recognition or lead generation, but you're just going to get more of what you have. So, for example, if you are looking to do brand recognition and we target this whole location here, geo targeted this whole location here, it'll be a difference of seeing your ad once a day or 10 times a day. That's essentially the difference.
Just to clarify, so you're talking about the ranking of the ads or the search results underneath?
I'm talking about the search results. Actually, yeah, we're mixing. I got confused with the PMAX thing. So yeah, with regards to the rankings, it would last as long as your budget is. So if you have $5, and you're doing $1 a click, then you have $5 worth of clicks. Yeah, depending on what your industry is, it's a different cost per click for each industry, each keyword.
And they get a copy of all your data, correct?
Data in terms of they track the website. They track your website. Mm-hmm. And you have to insert the tracking code onto your website for them to do that. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions about SEO? Or you had one?
Not a question on SEO.
Okay, just throw us
I
one
know
other
the
question.
topic is like digital transformation. I know, and thanks Sterling for your comments on your business. But I just wanted to inquire more about other forms of digital transformation as it relates to other industries, i.e. retail. Before the pandemic, a lot of them went online, adopted e-commerce, as well as digital transformation as it relates to enterprises. We're talking about marketing. Well, what about digital transformation as it relates to other programs to assist with, i.e. payroll, accounting, things of that nature? So I know there's a lot there to unbundle, but I'll let you tackle it accordingly.
Is there one of those in particular you're interested in?
Well, I guess since we're talking about marketing, well, let's talk about that as it relates to other industries.
Sure. You have any thoughts?
I guess it all depends on what your end goal is, right? When I was looking at the list of vendors, it's a whole wide range from marketing and, like you said, payroll, you name it. There's a whole slew of different categories. But yeah, I guess it would depend on what you're looking for. I'm sure they have a payroll section that is online versus a traditional desktop software. But yeah. I'm not sure if I answered that question.
Well, maybe going off that for e-commerce. You mentioned e-commerce.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on, one of the choices a business will have to make is about building their own website versus going to another marketplace? So I'm thinking of, if you're a retailer, do you try to compete on Amazon? Do you try to compete in like Walmart's got a marketplace, other places have marketplaces? And if you do your own, do you just, take Shopify's kind of all together kind of package, or do you try to customize with a different tool?
I think cost effectively, nobody's coming close to Shopify. It has everything. It has all the apps you need. It's widely known and it integrates with almost every software you could think of. So I would say Shopify would be for the e-commerce section. But when it comes to the digital transformation, AI is a big topic right now, and every business should be looking into how AI is effectively changing your industry. It's changing every single industry, bed mattresses, orthodontics, you name it. I see AI everywhere. So how is it going to help your business? How are you going to use it to leverage and save time and get you ahead of the rest of your competition? That's the biggest, buzz right now.
Yeah, I feel like, on that, as you say, AI is like the big buzz right now, and it does feel like there are many very useful applications that I've heard, but it also feels like we're in a little bit of a moment where people are also throwing on the letters AI into all sorts of things. And so it kind of means like almost whatever somebody wants it to mean. So when you're kind of evaluating it, what do you think are some of the kind of concrete, useful examples you've seen of AI?
I would say I've seen it in practical use today with scaling social media. So getting 30 posts ready. HeyGen and 11 Labs, if you guys want to jot those down, those are really good AI software where it would, the best way to scale your business is if you replicate yourself. So HeyGen, it will take a video of you and then you're just typing what you want it to say, and it's you on a video, and you could do 30 of these instantly. So nobody's going to be able to compete with you when you're leveraging AI like that. I think there's so many different AI out there, and like you said, you have to sift through a huge handful, try them out. The biggest factor right now is being able to have an AI make phone calls for you. That's a big bottleneck right now. Everybody generates leads, but nobody has the time to call them. I don't know what it is today, but nobody has time anymore to do anything. So the first thing that's going to be dropped is the phone calls. So we've been testing with a couple of AI programs where they're handling the objections, and it sounds amazing. And it still has some kinks to iron out, but I think that's something that is a big thing to look out for.
Interesting. Have you found there's been good reaction from it? I'm just thinking, this is purely my own personal view. If I got a call and it sounded like it was a robot talking to me, I would probably just hang up.
Yeah, so that's the biggest difference. So AI has been around for a long time. Like your Roomba, your Siri, your Google Assistant, it's all been running AI. But as of recently, it has public access. And the sixth stage of AI is the regenerative AI. So the voice, when they create the voice, you can't tell it's AI. Like the company that we're working with right now, on the phone calls, they're making jokes on the call, which was it blew everybody away. It's going to be hard to tell the difference.
Both promising and troubling in some ways, depending on how those tools are used. Okay, we got a few minutes left. Questions? Oh, back there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sterling. My main question will be, noticing how your company has rapidly grown over the years, what would be should be our best takeaway today? If we are starting as a small business and we want to have a rapid growth, what should be the number one thing to target first? I know we've spoken about marketing, different areas and different points. So what should be the number one, if you have to take one by one and say, this is the best, which should be your best? What's your best method? What's your best platform? What was the best thing you did that going back, you say, this is what I did that really made a difference? Thank you.
Right. So yeah, we get this question a lot, and I would say it would be marketing, and you have to identify the primary and secondary forms of marketing. So the primary would be lead generation, AdWords, getting business today, and the secondary form of marketing would be the billboard ads that you see outside. So the billboard ads that you see outside, nobody's going to pick up the phone and call you. It's just to reaffirm the appeal from your primary bucket that they chose the right company to work with. So if you have $10, I would spend that on lead generation even before your first hire, because once the leads come in, you're going to convert that into money, and then from there you can do your next hire and perhaps spend on secondary form of marketing. But I would say that the primary is lead generation because you need money today. I would say Google AdWords, and the reason why is because with the keywords you can really drill down to intent. So when you look at Facebook ads, they're relatively inexpensive compared to Google ads, but in our industry, if you're on Facebook, you're looking at your friends' vacation photos, you're not going to be all of a sudden like, hey, I want to buy a home now. But you will fill out that form, and that guy will get that lead. But I'm like 5 years down the line from buying. So with Google, if somebody's typing in, I am looking for a home in Toronto with a pool, chances are that guy's looking for a home in Toronto with a pool. So that the targeted is very honed in on intent of a customer.
All right, I think we're just about out of time, so I'll have to wrap up. Just want to say first thank you to Sterling for sharing your wisdom with us.
No problem.
And more importantly, thank you to the audience for being here. We couldn't do it without you. The next step now is lunch, which I'm sure everybody will look forward to. I think it's just over there, so it's a short walk to lunch. I have one other thing I got to read off of here for our audience at home. For those in the virtual audience, we'll be playing an interview recorded yesterday with Jacqueline Prehogan. Jacqueline is the co-founder and CEO of Canada Pooch, as well as the co-founder and chief brand officer of Open Farm. After the interview airs, there will be some polling you're welcome to participate in on the right panel of your screen. And have a great lunch, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dio Kofense, Managing Director of Dio Media and Communications. For those watching the Business Owner Summit virtually today, this is your bonus content to enjoy during your lunch hour. We're going to be discussing building a global brand with Jacqueline Prehogan, the co-founder and CEO of Canada Pooch, and co-founder and chief brand officer of Open Farm. Welcome, Jacqueline. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we get started by hearing a little bit more about your companies? Let's start with Canada Pooch. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Sure. Well, Canada Pooch is my first baby. We make functional gear for pets, so everything from winter coats to dog walking products to calming products. And we have now been serving the market for almost 13 years across Canada, the US, and the UK. And we're a very well-known and well-loved brand, especially in Canada.
How did you know it was time to create animal wear?
That is a good question. I think for me, um, being inspired came from my experiences with my own pet and seeing a white space. When we got our first dog, Bella, we went out to, buy products for her, buy her a winter coat, buy her a harness. And I felt like everything in the market was either, really kind of frilly and had no function at all, or was sort of overly heavy duty and really wasn't something that we would use every day. I also noticed that there were no branded products, and I saw such an opportunity to create a brand that people could know and trust and come back to for their pets.
Come together.
So we were already in the industry, and again, it was sort of this experience that we had. I'm a lifelong animal lover, and I, sort of had this change where I really started to think about where the food I was eating came from, and especially meat. And I wanted to make sure that it was coming from a good place and it was humanely raised. And of course, naturally, this sort of changed the way that we ate as a family, wanting to go back to the source and understand where all of our ingredients were coming from. And then, of course, our pets are part of our family, wanting to feed our dogs the same way. And again, really identified a white space. I remember going to a pet store saying, "Hey, do you have, anything with ingredients that are ethically sourced, that are, raised this way?" And they sort of looked at me like I was crazy. And at that moment, we really knew that we were onto something.
Can you tell us more about that, how you leaned into that?
For sure. And look, I'm a big believer that like we're good at what we love. And I have been, passionate about animals my entire life. And I think I sort of fought it in my career path. Like I, went to business school. I loved business, but then I became, a CPA because I thought that was the right thing to do. And then I went to law school. I started law school thinking that was, what I should do. And ultimately, I was just drawn by my love of animals and my passion for entrepreneurship. And it seemed so crazy at the time. It was like, I'm dropping out of law school to start a company that's going to make, pet wear. And I'm so glad I did it because ultimately what I found was I loved it. I was passionate about it. And I was willing to hustle to make that, my reality. So I'm a big believer in that.
So you followed your passion, but you had to hustle, to use your term, to convince others that this was something worth believing in. So to get that sale going, what did you end up doing?
That's a great question. So first of all, I had, never designed anything, never manufactured anything, never sold anything, definitely. And if anything, I was like really uncomfortable with going out and selling things. But I had samples. I packed a Team Canada bag of like these dog mannequins and my samples, and I drove around to like 100 stores, in the GTA, and I walked in and said, "Hey, I've got this product. Will you take a look?" And they did, and they loved it. But actually, what happened was, I was getting great feedback, but I wasn't closing any sales. So I said to my husband, like, "What do you think's going on?" And he sat me down and he showed me that scene from Glengarry Glen Ross, the ABCs of selling, and he said, like, "You got to close the sale. You have to get them to sign on the dotted line." And that was such a key entrepreneurial lesson, that to get over that discomfort and ask for the sale.
Right.
And that's really, in those early days, what I had to do was sort of push through. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to sort of ask for the sale and get out of my comfort zone. And it was really necessary to grow the business.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking you really pushed out of your comfort zone to make that happen. Would you say that's advice that you would offer other business owners? And is there anything else you would kind of offer as tips for people who might be feeling a little tentative when they have a new or different idea?
Absolutely. I think it's table stakes for an entrepreneur, because everything you do, you're learning on the spot. And at least for me, as I've grown the business, at every single stage, I've had to like fully reinvent myself and say, how can I add value to the business now? And so that means you're going to be doing new things, and you're going to have to be doing things that you're not good at and that you haven't done before. So I do think it's table stakes. And I think, in terms of advice, I think sometimes we can negotiate with ourselves, and we can sort of tell ourselves all the reasons not to do something. And I also feel like sometimes when we have that feeling in the pit of our stomach, it's like it says to us, no, I shouldn't do this. But actually, that's adrenaline. And that's a natural reaction to doing something new. And I once got advice. It was actually about public speaking, when I would get nervous, to take that feeling and like use it as jet fuel and be like, I should have this. I should have this feeling of adrenaline, and help that carry you, instead of fighting it and saying, I shouldn't feel this way. This is telling me I shouldn't do it. But really to use, any reticence to actually drive you forward.
Let's talk a little bit about the adrenaline that it took to drive Open Farm forward. Another different idea that you brought to the pet industry, where you had to do a bit of convincing. Tell us a little bit about a hurdle you might have had with that one.
Sure. What hurdle did we not have with that one? First of all, when we entered the pet industry, is 2014. It's so saturated. There's so many companies, and they have deep pockets. And everyone said to us, like, don't even bother. It's so competitive. Most brands fail. But we ultimately really believe that we had a different concept with this whole better sourced pet food, and humanely raised and sustainably sourced. And so just getting over the mental hurdle of, who cares what everybody says? Like, let's believe in our idea and let's try this. That was the first one. And just having such conviction in your idea that you push forward. In the early days, another hurdle that we had, this is more execution, was to make this happen. We had to source from, amazing farms that were, supplying natural grocers and whole foods. They never sold to a pet company. They didn't want to sell to a pet company. And we had to get out there and knock on doors and convince them to work with us. And that was so much rejection, so many no's, but ultimately, we pushed through and built this incredible supply chain. We work with the best farmers in the world. And yeah, we continue to do that every single day, build out that network. And, as you go, you get momentum, you get credibility, it does get easier.
But how do your key markets differ for each brand? And then how do you market these brands? Are there any differentiators brand to brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say key markets, like, first of all, let's say Canada, US, and China. Canada is like, there's fewer urban centers. It's really big geographically. And Canadians have their own mentality, right? So you're going to have, say, fewer salespeople who are going to travel more. And like, think of Target, who came in and, why did they fail? Because they didn't acknowledge the difference in, that Canadian mentality. So you really need to think that through. And then the US is almost like, 50 different markets. Like there's so many different urban centers. Think of, the Northeast versus, the South, completely different consumer base. And you really need to understand each one well. And, we've really tried to find people and partners that have deep knowledge in each of those regions, that they know it. We don't pretend to know it, to help us grow. And then you take China as an example. China's like, I mean, that's at a whole other level where, for example, cats are the main pet there because of their lifestyle, where it's here, it's dogs. And so you're actually marketing to a cat parent, and almost all, sales are done online with a few, very dominant players. And so, and it's all about relationships and partnerships. So again, there, you really need to immerse yourself in the market. You need to find the people and partners that know the market to educate you and to carry out business there.
Are there other factors that you would consider when entering a market?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would say that we've spent more time saying no to entering markets than yes. And I'd say the biggest reason is you need to make sure that you're ready as a business, right? Like it takes a lot of time, resource, capital to enter a market properly. And I'd say one of the biggest factors is, are we ready? And then of course you're going to look at that market, you're going to say what's the addressable market, what's the opportunity size, and also what's the suitability of my product. So imagine we had no cat products and we wanted to go, we only were a dog company going to China. That wouldn't work, right? Imagine we were trying to sell Canada Pooch in Florida and we only had winter coats, you know, that wouldn't work. But we have, harnesses and we've got cooling product. So we're going to tailor our assortment for that market. Um, so there's a lot of factors that involve looking both within your company and at the market, and then of course ensuring that you have the capital and to actually execute on whatever that plan is.
Now, you talked a little bit about tactics, and we wanted to kind of go in deep there as well to find out which marketing tactics when you're building a brand that you find most effective in helping to drive those sales.
So I think for us, without getting into sort of like the nitty gritty, like on a macro level, probably the best thing we ever did for both companies is we set them up as omni-channel. So we have very strong D2C, like right off of our website sales, and then retail sales through many different partner retailers. And the reason that that's so effective is you create this halo in your marketing. So when we run on our digital ads, not only are we driving people to our site, but we're creating awareness and we're driving them to store. And then also the ability to partner with retailers to create strong brand presence, to get the people in the store recommending your product is a very cost-effective way of marketing your brand. And then again, you want that consumer to have as many touch points as possible with your brand, whether it's like traditional marketing and they're seeing a billboard and then a TV commercial, which we're not doing any of those things right now. But for us, it's, they're seeing us with a great retail presence. They're, seeing one of our ads online, and they are continuing to sort of, they're seeing an influencer talking about Open Farm. They're Googling best pet food and they're finding, a list of best pet foods and they're seeing Open Farm on it. So it's really about finding those cost-effective, efficient touch points that are going to target that consumer throughout their journey, but in a way that you can scale and that you can measure.
And that's particularly important, especially as the market and the economy is so tight that people have to be very mindful about where they put their funding and their capital and their money towards these marketing efforts, right?
100%.
So, Jacqueline, branding is a big part of the success of Canada Pooch and Open Farm. Can you tell me why you've been so intentional about branding and why it's so critical for businesses?
For sure. So I think the first thing is that I've realized is, uh, having a brand helps you build a more valuable business, end of story. That's how you, create brand love, brand loyalty, recurrent sales. If you don't have a brand, ultimately you're falling into the category of a commodity. And especially when you're working with retailers, they can do that themselves. They can, do their own private label. They can produce things directly. Having a brand is what makes the retailer want to carry your product. It's what makes the consumer look for you if you can prove out the brand. And I think, the most important thing that we've done with our brands is ultimately create authenticity. And that starts with knowing who you are as a brand, having a set of core values, and living them every single day. Making your team live those core values and be intrinsically motivated, and really delivering that consistency, whether that's great customer service, whether that's the best quality product, but ultimately sort of creating these tenets that consumers get to know you for, and ultimately continue to come back for, and develop a huge amount of trust in your brand.
So, Jacqueline, you've been supremely successful in getting your businesses out of Canada into the US, into international markets. And there are many business owners watching today who would like to do the same. They're thinking about it, but they're not sure how. What advice would you have for them?
That's a great question. I would say first and foremost, think about what is your core business, and is it the right time to expand internationally? Like I said, the best thing that we've ever done is say no until it was the right time. And because of that, when that right time came, we were able to have, all the pieces in place to be successful. So that's the first time. Is it the right time? And how are you sort of at a place in your core business and the infrastructure of your business where you're ready? The next piece is like you could go anywhere. So where do you want to go? And again, you really need to sort of assess the market itself, and where is that opportunity for your product? And just because you think there is a general opportunity, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for your company. So you have to, you need both parts of the equation to make sense. And once you really establish that, it's having a solid plan. And throwing spaghetti at the wall with international, like I promise it won't work, because number one, you need to understand the market. Number two, typically you need the right partners. So whether that's distribution partners, whether that's a specialized marketing agency that understands how to communicate with that consumer, whether it's a specialized sales infrastructure that's going to work with the retailers there and be on the ground, whatever it is, you want to be really thoughtful and spend the time to plan. And again, making sure that you are well capitalized to execute on that plan so that you can go. And believe me, big companies, companies like Starbucks, have had to attempt to enter markets more than once. And so we all, have challenges actually, no matter how well we plan, but taking that time up front to understand will give you the best chance of success.
When you were talking about passion, it really struck me how much passion can help drive that adrenaline that you're talking about, that fear that you were talking about earlier, to help build success. As we close and wrap up our chat this afternoon, can you tell me a little bit about how you can use passion to overcome challenges, and maybe something that you've done where you've used your passion to overcome potential business challenges?
Yeah, I'm someone who's so driven by passion. And I think that, like I said, we're sort of good at what we love. So I think, the first piece is sort of what is your passion, and giving yourself that time to sort of accept it. Because again, I think for me, it was, I grew up loving animals. I wanted to be a vet, but realized that wasn't the right path. And so how could I channel this passion into something that could actually help me, be successful and have a meaningful career? And so I had to, go down a path, but ultimately I think it was accepting it and saying, it's okay that I love animals and that's what I want to do. It's okay that I'm not going to do what my parents did. They're both lawyers and, stay in law school. I'm actually going to drop out of law school and I'm going to pursue this. And even though it might seem crazy at the time, I think ultimately it's really something that's going to give you that persistence and that drive to succeed no matter what. And in terms of, turning that passion into, something constructive, I have actually another side to my passion, which is sustainability in animal welfare. And so I could have just gone and started any pet company. I could have just made dog food, but I always said, I'm never going to do that because that's actually factory farmed animals. That's everything that I'm against. But maybe I could do this differently. Maybe we could actually create a humanely raised pet food. Maybe we could create a sustainable pet food. It's never been done before. And ultimately, it was the belief and the passion, that drove us forward and helped us create something that was actually totally unique. And at the very beginning, I talked about the fact that the industry was so saturated, all these businesses were failing. And so the way that we were able to break in was having something really different. And that came from our idea and what we really wanted to do. And now we are the fastest growing pet food brand in our channel of Neighborhood Pet in North America. So, believe in your passion, let it guide you, and it will drive success.
Jacqueline, you've left me totally inspired as we close. Thank you so much for this great chat. This is all the time we have today, but on behalf of the Globe and Mail, I want to thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sandra Martin, and I'm the standards editor here at the Globe and Mail. And I'm really excited to chat with our next guest about business efficiency. And now more than ever, businesses have to be agile, they have to be adaptable, and they have to be cost efficient. So that's what we're going to be focusing on over the next 20 minutes or so. So on that note, please welcome with me, Deirdre Lipton, the small and medium corporate lead at Microsoft Canada. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you for calling out small, medium corporate lead. We at Microsoft have a lot of acronyms, so if I say SMC a lot, that's the same thing. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am the Vice President of SMC Canada, and we manage about 90% of the Canadian customers out there. And we do it in scale with our partners and our amazing partner network to really deliver local, regional impact. And so it's awesome to be here with you today. I wanted to start off actually to talk about Microsoft, and for anybody who's worked with Microsoft, you'll know we're a very purpose-driven company. And so we're here to really help customers and partners, or every person on this planet, to achieve more. And that would be exactly what my team does in SMC. We work closely with our partners and customers to help them achieve more in business transformation. And I would say, without dating myself, I've been in the tech industry for over 20 years, at Microsoft 7 years, and now is probably the most exciting time that's going on, and it's all because of AI. It's not a hype, it's not an upgrade, it's not a fad, it is here for real. And I would also say that Microsoft, we consider ourselves as customer zero inside. We're really learning about AI, we're sharing practices as much as we can, and we're trying to really have a pragmatic approach about it with how do you enrich employee experience every single day? How do you reinvent customer engagement? How do you reshape business operations? Because we are a highly compliant company, and we have a lot of processes that you can drive efficiency out of. And then how do you bend that AI transformation curve so you continue to accelerate? And so that's what my team does. We work a lot with customers from someone down the block to ones with hundreds of employees, and really helping drive that transformation.
So I know we're going to dig into some case studies, but let's start by talking high level. What are some areas where tech can help business become more efficient?
Yeah, we do lots of studies at Microsoft, and the most recent Work Trend Index study said that people are spending 3 times the amount of their time in meetings right now versus 2020. So just think about that. 3x the amount of time you spend in meetings, and I know I feel like I do spend 3x the amount of time in meetings since 2020. And so it's really, really necessary for people to drive efficiency in those meetings. And in many of those meetings, the biggest challenge is they are inefficient. People leave without being able to be creative, innovative in those meetings, and they're just trying to get the task at hand done. And so AI has really helped to improve the quality of the meetings. Maybe a show of hands. Anybody who's used Copilot here with Microsoft? I don't want to speak. Oh, that's wonderful. There's quite a few hands that go up. And so we have a technology called Copilot, and that is exactly what it is if you're not familiar with it. It is not autopilot. It is your personal assistant that's going to really help you drive forward with technology and efficiency and productivity. And so Copilot for Teams if anybody's used it, helps give a summary of those meetings. So if you think about efficient meetings and really allowing time to get back to what you enjoy most about your role, Copilot gives summary of meetings, it gives action items, who spoke to what, and who's going to take those notes. I sometimes, because I am back-to-back to meetings, will join a meeting late, and I can ask Copilot on the side, please give me a summary of what I've missed already. So I'm not interrupting a meeting, and I can be effective and impactful in those meetings. So that's one way to drive efficiency. I did want to give a customer example, though. It's a fantastic customer. So City of Kelowna, they are really forward-thinking when it comes to AI. And what started off as a bot that they used with their local airport, they soon realized the power of AI within their organization. And their mission is to serve their customers and their citizens, obviously. And so what they did is there's 3 examples that when they shared it with us of how they used AI, I thought are very realistic examples that all of us could appreciate. The first one is they use AI for citizens to call in about waste management. So somebody who has a question about how to dispose of something, they have high sustainability goals in the City of Kelowna. This virtual assistant will give them direction of how to get rid of that waste, I guess. The second one was snow removal. So you wouldn't be able to tell it's winter right now, but when there's heavy snow and you want to understand how you can get out of your street and the snow plows are coming, they actually have a virtual assistant that you can talk to that can give you the GPS location, because the snowplow has an IoT sensors on top, and can tell you the ETA of when that snowplow is coming to your location, which is pretty incredible as a citizen. And then the third one, which I think anybody who's built a house or done some type of inspection report, they have built an AI tool now where it guides people through the inspection or filling out the building permits so that there's less back and forth, and they submit compliant submissions that get approved much faster. And those are just everyday use cases that this city is using to really help deliver great services. But what is more important is the efficiencies it's driving internally for their staff. So then those people can in turn work on what's most meaningful to them in the City of Kelowna.
That's really interesting. Now, I think the efficiency piece is pretty clear to a lot of people, but there's often surprise if we talk about the ability of tech to make the workplace more inclusive.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that for a little bit?
Absolutely. I think all of us would agree diversity and inclusion is key to a successful, thriving culture where people can do their best work. And so diversity of thought, great decision making, and inclusion is really about being part of a team and feeling like you're having meaningful impact. There was a study done that said when people aren't included, they experience the same physical pain as if, or they experience the same pain, I should say, as if you physically got hurt. So think about that. If a person goes to work and they don't feel included, they will experience that pain and probably not show up and do their best work. And so we're really conscious of building tools that are very accessible to all. And most business leaders probably don't realize that many people they work with might have a disability. It may not be visible disability, but a disability that you can see. And people don't want to declare that necessarily. And so we build tools to make sure that it has accessibility for all, because when you have an even platform or level playing field for everybody to participate, you're going to have a much stronger workforce that is able to drive that productivity, and you're extremely inclusive. I would say even collaboration tools that maybe aren't labeled as excessive are still pretty important when you think of hybrid work, bringing people back together. Whether you need to work from home one day, you're a caregiver, it really gives the opportunity for people to be included, and AI is only accelerating that with transcriptions and recording and live caption, that you can actually do translation when you're on calls now, and so it's pretty incredible the way you can include people from diverse backgrounds, languages, you name it.
It's been interesting to read the research from COVID virtual meetings where employees from underrepresented communities said, actually, I felt more comfortable being on a virtual call. So that was kind of a coincidental benefit of being on virtual calls.
Absolutely, yes.
And I want to talk about managers and business leaders. The risk of burnout is really high. There's often a feeling of a mission attached to your work, especially if you're a founder. So how can entrepreneurs and other leaders find a way to allow themselves to let go of tasks and truly focus on the things that they need to focus on, not on the executional stuff?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I would declare I'm not an entrepreneur. Having said that, at Microsoft, everybody's empowered to run our business like it's our own. I have my own P&L, I have my own OpEx, and so I need to run the business as if it's my own business and I'm an entrepreneur. And what we know is that, in general, 2 out of 3 people would say they don't have enough time in the day to actually get their core work done. And so there's consequences with that, right? There is lack of creativity, innovation in those days, and then people probably do work after hours, on the weekends, and the cycle just continues. And so absolutely, technology can help enable, whether it be through collaboration tools, it is using AI to drive efficiencies and reimagining what is possible and add that creativity back in. I'd also say empowerment is huge, right? And so really trusting your team. Microsoft is potentially one of the most matrix organizations out there. It's extremely complicated, and we use the tools to be able to collaborate together on teams, on channels, on specific projects, on specific customer engagements. And so having that, that technical ability is really, really important to help empower people to actually trust their team, to do the work that they need to do that meaningful work. So again, you can go back and re-engineer and reimagine what's possible within your own organization. And it's hard to let go. It's very hard to let go. But the fact that you have the visibility to that means that you can be included in the decisions in some ways without having to make the decisions.
It's interesting because it can be very demotivating to have a micromanaging leader. Yeah. So if the leader has the ability to peek in at certain times without directly...
Or contribute, right? They can add their 2 cents.
Right, so that the person who's been assigned can feel like, yes, I'm actually still running this. I don't have somebody looking over my shoulder. It's a field of collaboration, if you will. Yeah. So let's want to look at how do you know that you're not, as a leader, as a business owner, you're not achieving your company's sort of best growth potential. What are the things you look for? If, you know, what could help you find out whether and where you could achieve more efficiency?
It's interesting. I just came back from Redmond last week, and we had this training that I thought of that really, as you asked that question, resonated with me. And that is, leaders nowadays are operating in 2 states. You've got to perform and actually execute upon the business you know today, but you have to transform your business and invent for the future years so you can continue to go. And it's this like infinity cycle that goes on, but they're at tension with each other all the time. And so you've got to be able to find the balance. And really it's looking at how do you diagnose what the problem is and how do you fix the problem. And so we talked a lot last week about adaptive leadership and being able to adapt to situations. And you're going to have these peaks and valleys. You're not always going to have a problem, you fix it, and then you move on to the next problem. And so how do you adapt along the way? And one of the ways that you tap into is an engagement type of technology to really get a sense of how your team is doing, to get a pulse of the business that will allow you to understand, are we going in the right direction? How do we continue to perform really well, but how do we transform at the same time? And so it's an interesting cycle that we're in with leadership. And the other thing they said to us was, it's going to be like this for the next 7 years. It's not something that's going to be over right away. And so we, as leaders, really need to understand and adapt, use technology where it makes sense. I think it would be, if I didn't say that I am obviously very proud to work at Microsoft, a big fan of AI, but it's not out there to replace jobs by any means. AI is to enhance the work that people are doing today, to make them more productive, to make them more efficient, to recreate what is possible and give that imagination to people. And so I want to make sure that that is a key piece of how you do it, but is within reason too.
For owners of small and medium business, there's often the concern that if they automate, they take on more technology, it will become expensive very quickly. And what's your response to a leader who's concerned about the price tag?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to take a step back and look at it, but the risk, there's a cost of technology and there's a people cost as well, right? And so if you can work out, and by no means am I saying taking people out of the business, it's how do you drive those efficiencies with cloud computing, for example. Sharing of information, being able to collaborate much at a quicker pace will enhance the ability to grow and move faster and accelerate. And so I think that it's something to be aware of for sure, but we've proven that it's been more expensive to have your own data center or data estate or versus working in the cloud to be able to scale and grow as you need it. So you scale up or scale down when you need it, and that's really been able to save companies a lot of money and time and energy to be able to, instead of building it on their own, they're either born in the cloud and working with it, or they're using other technology.
So there's one thing to make the decision to bring on more technology, and another to get your staff's buy-in. So change management is a piece of it. Are there any tips or sort of watch-outs that you can share about change management?
You're absolutely right. If you don't get people on board, it's pretty hard to do change management. And I'd say you can't declare victory too soon. Getting people on board takes steps and times and process, and so it is iterative. And you celebrate the successes along the way. But I also think it goes back to creating the purpose and the why you're changing. That there is something bigger, better, some place to go to that will really entice people to want to change, right? And a lot of people can be change averse. That is absolutely normal. Some people run at change faster than change itself. And so bringing everybody along and having that coalition towards the change is key important. But in my experience, we'll roll out a change and assume it's all going right and everybody's on board. And we forget to check back in that, hey, there's a whole bunch of people that either don't understand the change, haven't bought in. And so I think making sure you have those regular checkpoints, but also that you bring people along with you and really give them the purpose and the why. It's a big thing.
Right, so I'm going to take it from high level to tactical again. What are some tools that can help develop efficiency in some of the areas we just discussed and that business owners could start using right away?
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure it's not a Microsoft sales pitch up here. But I absolutely, if we look at any of our tools, I think that is a way to enhance and ensure that you're driving that productivity and efficiency, whether it be Teams or other collaboration tools. It's a way to connect everybody within the business. If I go back to the beginning where we think about how do we build just very standard AI practices, like how do you improve your employee experience and engagement? That is something that's going to pay dividends in a long time because you're going to bring people back into the office or perhaps work remote who are going to feel fulfilled and want to do their best work every single day. And there's no price that can pay for that. Customer engagement would be whether it be through CRM tools that you're using today to be able to track your customers, their insights, and be able to bring relevant information to your customer base would be another way. And then I think employee engagement and really checking in. We have something called Viva, which takes a pulse of how people are doing and understanding how everybody's feeling within the organization and with everything that's going on in technology. We're still coming back into a shift of work and people are finding their ways to adapt.
All right, well, thank you so much. Now, I think we might have time, if you're open, for one or two questions. Can we share? You shot your hand up very quickly.
Yeah, I know.
The world is watching.
Okay, I appreciate that.
The world is watching. Toronto's watching. Has IBM developed a strategy or policy regarding back to the office? The banks are watching. The accounting firms are watching. They're waiting to see what IBM says. Has IBM instituted a policy of back to the office?
Microsoft, you mean?
Microsoft, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. You got me confused for a second.
Yeah.
You know what? That's a great question. Microsoft has always been a hybrid work environment. We've never had an in-office policy there, but I would say I get a lot of enjoyment coming to the office. I come in 2 or 3 times a week. I have meetings. I meet with colleagues. I collaborate, but we've never actually had an enforced policy. It's always been hybrid. It's always been flexible. So I don't anticipate them changing that. And I think maybe I'm a bit biased, but giving people the flexibility, I go back to what's going to really keep people engaged and doing their best work, and that is giving them choice. And so you can't take away from in-person meetings. When it happens, there's a lot of great synergies that happen, but giving people flexibility also allows them to operate within their day.
Okay, and I think, yes, thank you. Hand back there.
I'm curious, I'm just give you some background. Thank you to the Globe and Mail for all your stories on various retailers partnering with Microsoft in the past year since this ChatGPT has evolved. I'm very curious as to how Microsoft can work with the proprietary information of various major retailers with all of their data and input and conversation partnering with Microsoft when they are competitors, how Microsoft or if Microsoft keeps those closets and those drawers completely separate, and is that information that these various retailers share with Microsoft, is it also proprietary to Microsoft in that is Microsoft gathering this information for its own development of further product, and how do you keep it all separate?
So just to make sure Deirdre has time to answer you, I just want to stop you there.
Yeah, no problem.
You had talked about security earlier when we were chatting.
Absolutely. So I can confidently say that we don't keep people's data. It is your data. And I know there's a lot of confusion before when ChatGPT first came out, and it's an awesome system and tool. Within Microsoft, we do not share data. It's your data within your tenant. It's safe. You have access to it. We don't have access to it. And so we don't learn from your data, which is we learn from our own data, but we don't learn from yours. So it is absolutely safe there. And then what we were talking about previously, and I know we're at time, but security is an incredible piece of any AI, whether it's identity and security or is access controls, is something that needs to go in tandem with AI. And that is all something that we can definitely talk to you about. I'm not the expert by any means, but I can rest assured your data is your data within the tenants, and we don't access that or share it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you very much.
I can't believe we're out of time, but it's amazing.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So just a bit of housekeeping before I let you go. We're going to head into some breakout sessions now. So if you are here in the room and you've signed up for the session on how to deal with decreasing demand, you can stay right here. If you signed up for the sessions on cybersecurity, perfect segue, or regulatory compliance, you can exit this room and follow the signage to determine where your breakout session is. And if you're in the virtual audience joining us from wherever you are, you'll be tuning into the session on decreasing demand, which is here on the main stage. So thank you very much. Thank you, Deirdre. Have a great day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our breakout session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Menaka Raman-Wilms. I host The Decibel, the Globe and Mail's podcast. And if you haven't heard us, please check us out. It's the daily news podcast. We run Monday to Friday, do an in-depth story every day, and it's about 20 minutes. So yeah, please check us out. But today I am here to talk to Laura Burgett. We are talking today in our breakout session about proactive and adaptive strategies for navigating decreased demand. Laura is, of course, the co-founder of Three Ships Beauty. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And, of course, we want this session to be as interactive as possible. And if you have questions, please ask us throughout. You can just raise your hand. Someone with a mic will find you. You can ask your question. We'll also just kind of try to keep it interactive to see what you guys are interested in talking about. We'll chat for about 30 minutes, and then we're also going to open it up to a more exclusive Q&A section at the end for about the last 10 minutes. So you'll have your chance then to get questions in as well. But I think we will just get started, Laura. Maybe we can just kind of have a little bit of an overview. Can you just tell us, what your role is at Three Ships and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Definitely. So Three Ships is a line of natural skincare products founded by myself and my co-founder, Connie Lowe, of the frustration that it was impossible to find natural products that actually delivered results and came in at a great price point. So we launched to market around 3.5 years ago in July of 2020, Within the team, my background is in chemical engineering. I'm a graduate from U of T. So I oversee all of our back-end operations, logistics, supply chain, product development, finance, and also marketing. So a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a very, very busy day-to-day workflow. And tell me a little bit about like being a co-founder. So this is obviously between you and Connie, you're doing this together. What was that experience like?
It's been amazing, honestly. I've run a business in the past as a solo entrepreneur. So much respect for any solo entrepreneurs that might be in the room or tuning in. I knew it wasn't for me. I wanted a partner within this business. Her and I met through a mutual friend, and it just clicked instantly that I knew that she was my co-founder match. So it's been great.
Great. All right, so when we were doing a little bit of prep, you were actually talking about one of the key things that you wanted to bring up is transparency, and how you really work to manage your team with a lot of transparency, especially when it comes to the health of your company and the results, right? So I guess, can you just walk us through what does transparency look like?
So within our teams, this is something that I think is really important, especially within a challenging economic environment like we're currently seeing. You have to realize that your team is reading all the news headlines that you're reading as well. They're reading about mass layoffs, they're reading about increase in interest rates, they're reading about a pending recession. So it's really important for you to be honest with them, or else they'll start making up stories in their own minds. And it can be really scary for people and employees, especially at smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses. So what transparency looks like to us and what we do is we're very clear about our financial goals with everybody. We're clear about when we miss the targets. We don't sugarcoat misses if they do happen. We talk about our learnings. Comes down to making it very okay across the organization for people to make mistakes, as long as learnings are pulled from those errors. And the degree of financial transparency that we share is, I think, pretty broad. Like, we'll even share bank balance, like how much cash we have in the bank, how much runway we have as a startup, which is a really important metric. We'll share gross margins and how those are improving and what we're focused on within the financial health of the business. We'll share debt ratios. We'll share when we're thinking of raising future funds. So I think having this degree of financial conversation with your employees gives them a sense of feeling like a true partner in the business, and also gives them the sense of, I'm in this till the end. You'd actually be surprised what your employees will be willing to do when they know the realities of the company too. So if you do face hard times, it's like an all-team, like all hands on deck type of conversation with them, instead of them being scared and feeling like they're just along for the ride. They're really helping to guide the boat.
Can I ask though, because I feel like, I think a lot of people might think, in a way that could backfire. Like if you're talking about, showing bank balances and everything, that's really a lot of transparency, right? Like, do you find sometimes though that, there is that potential to go too far? Like, is there a backlash, or could it backfire potentially?
I'm sure it's possible. So if the business is like 2 weeks away from shutting down, you probably don't want to share that degree of information with them. Fortunately, we've never been in that position. But I think it's about having those open communication channels so that people aren't scared and making up their own stories, because they will do that otherwise. Of course, do what makes sense for your organization, what you feel comfortable with. But in my view, the more that you can share, the better.
And so, just last question on this. It sounds like you've seen, is there a difference in, I guess, morale as a result of that? Like, does it impact that?
Yeah, it really affects morale. So the team feels more engaged. They feel closer to us as co-founders and to their managers. They feel like they can come to us with different ideas and concerns. We do employee engagement studies every single month, where we send out a survey to our entire team. And that allows us to keep a really, really close pulse check on the business. It's completely anonymous and asks them some very pointed questions. And after we started sharing all of our financial details in so much depth, which started, I think, around 2 years ago, we found that those morale scores actually went up.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the U.S. market, because this is something that you've broken into. Why do you think the U.S. market is something that Canadian businesses should look towards? And I guess, what has your experience been in that market?
For Canadian companies that are currently exporting to the US, you're missing out on a huge segment, and you're probably hurting the success of your own company. I think for some reason, Canadians have this mindset when I talk to other founders that they're like, exporting is really hard, there's going to be a lot of logistical challenges, it's going to be difficult from a regulatory standpoint. It's really not the case.
It kind of feels like it. Like, I feel like a lot of Canadian businesses think, well, this is the smaller market, I can do better here, rather than trying to jump into something massive, right? But you're saying not so much the case.
It's not the case. Luckily, because of the trade agreements that we have with the US, it makes it actually fairly easy to set up business and to start selling over there, especially within our our industry, our sector, which is the beauty industry, the US is 10 times larger than Canada. It's much easier to focus on just one state, one piece of the US at a time. You definitely don't want to approach it as an entire country. Focus on one market. So for example, the first market that we focused on was California. That's where our consumer base that cares about natural health and wellness really is living. That's where they're like a huge concentration of them. So for instance, one of the retailers that we're carried at across the entire US is Whole Foods. We're carried at all of their locations. And we were able to pilot with them just in Northern California. So it was just 20 stores at a time. We were able to really concentrate our marketing efforts in that one region, pour digital marketing just into that area, and it allows you to get a really good foothold on that local market, which is still massive. It's, you know, millions, tens of millions of people that live in the state of California. So if you're overwhelmed by going after the US as a whole, just focus on one state, one market at a time. And you can also leverage programs through the government, which we've made use of. EGP is amazing. It helps you get access to financing specifically for exporting. If cash flow is a problem, they'll partner up with your bank. We've done this with RBC quite successfully. And Can Export as well provides funding for you to focus on specific markets in specific states at a time. Both of which are very easy to get started with. It's not an overwhelming process of going through grant applications. So that would be my suggestion, is just find the market. The US is also doing incredibly well right now. Canada for us was pretty much flat year over year within our e-commerce channel, grew almost 100% year over year last year in the US. They're not feeling the same financial pressures, I think, that we are in Canada from a consumer standpoint. So it's a market that's doing very, very well.
So there's the potential
There's
there
the
for you to do
potential,
well.
yeah.
I think when we were talking about it earlier, you used the term micro market. So
Yeah.
like targeting parts of California or somewhere else in the States. Is that, I guess, how you think about it? Like really precise targeting of an area or market?
It very much is how we think about it. So again, we started in Northern California, then we expanded to Southern California, then we found through our own e-commerce data, you will have access to a lot of this data already. We found that the next two biggest markets for us were the state of New York City specifically, and then Austin, Texas, which was another hot spot. So again, we focused our marketing activations in those areas, focus like retail in-store sampling activations, focus in-market events that we're going in person, meeting up with our consumers in those specific markets. And that's far more successful than when we tried to blast and just target the US as a whole. That's very challenging. You need to have quite a bit of capital behind you to do that.
Yeah, that feels overwhelming to get into
It
almost
is,
too, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
better to try the smaller markets first. Can I just ask, maybe we can do a little poll, like who has actually taken steps to break into the US market, just by, I guess, show of hands? Like if you have, can you raise your hand? So we've got a few, not
Maybe
too
5 people.
many actually, yeah. And
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, if you haven't, that sounds like it's pretty much the rest of the room. I don't know if I saw a couple of hands over here. Yeah, maybe we can get, I don't know if you have any questions about the US market, but maybe we can come back to this in a little bit, because this seems like almost a counterintuitive thing that a lot of businesses think they shouldn't necessarily do early on, but it could be beneficial.
It could be beneficial, yeah. We did it fairly early on, and I think it was a great decision for us. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about finances, specifically balance sheet management. I guess, what are some changes that you've implemented in that area recently that you've found have been a benefit to the company?
Definitely. So because we're a physical product business, cash flow is always king for us. Q4 is our busiest time of the year by far. Skincare is very giftable. And so we find that we always have a cash crunch in the summer when we're having to load up on all of our product for the winter busy period. So what we've started to do is we've started to negotiate blanket POs with our manufacturers. So this maybe is like a fairly simple concept to apply, but has been incredible for us with cash flow management. That way we're not sitting on a bunch of inventory that maybe isn't moving as well as we thought, or your demand plan is off. So speaking about turbulent times, which is, of course is our topic, this is a great way to limit the amount of cash you're sitting on within inventories, negotiate blanket POs with your contract manufacturers. Also, of course, do the essentials of pushing out your payment terms as far as you possibly can, renegotiate those every single year. It's a very simple thing, but tends to get forgotten about in the hecticness of the day-to-day, to just renegotiate your terms, get paid faster from your retailer side if you sell wholesale, and then push out those payments to your suppliers. So that would be two of my biggest recommendations when it comes to balance sheet management if you're a physical product business.
And can I ask, is that like something you've learned over time? It sounds
Learned
like
over time, yeah.
Okay.
And in the early stages, like you don't really have much clout to be able to ask for certain payment terms. It's going to be like you have to pay right away.
Yeah.
And then over time, as your suppliers start to have that payment history with you, you should have the confidence to go back to them and say, you know, we've been working together for a year now. Let's take another look at our payment terms and push them out, and do that every single year. It'll really pay off dividends in the long run. And then also, during turbulent times, if you're concerned, okay, I don't know how the economy is going to look, we're starting to already feel the impact. A number of our retailers, for example, are really suffering. So I really feel for them in particular. So if you're starting to go through those challenges, I would probably advise to minimize the outlay of capital expenditures and like new big investments into projects. Anything that's a big sunk cost, focus more on your like tried and true methods. Still grow your marketing, your demand side to like drum up sales, but those big bets, it's probably not a great time to make them. I know that we're not making big bets right now.
Okay, you're playing it a little safer.
A little safer, like still investing hard into the things that we know work, and expanding our marketing spend. We're almost doubling our marketing spend year over year, but we're not investing in other ways. So like, for example, getting additional certifications for our products that might cost $20,000 per clinical test that we run. We're not doing those this year because we're like, we don't know what this is going to generate and what this is going to drive. Yes, it's a great investment for the long term, but it's probably more important for us to invest in growth right now than in some of these like, maybe this will work, maybe this won't.
Yeah. You were also mentioning that you meet and analyze your books weekly, I think, so you can adjust your forecasting accordingly. I guess, yeah, what impact have you seen from that decision, and how has that changed your business?
I think it's fairly uncommon for a small business like ours to be looking at their books so regularly, but it's a best practice for sure. It only takes 30 minutes that we sit down with our controller and the management team every single week, start of the week on the Mondays. Basically, you just look at your ARAP listings, your sales versus forecast for that month, make adjustments if you need to, redo your forward-looking forecast for the rest of the year. Very, very simple stuff, but things that do get overlooked. Allows us to be really proactive in our responses. So we can like, you know, reliably look forward and be like, oh, we're going to have a cash crunch in 4 to 5 months, and start planning for that now, instead of realizing, oh wait, we have 1 month of cash left in the bank, which so often is what we hear from people.
Yeah. And I will just remind everyone for questions, I think we do have a question over here actually, so if we could get a mic over there. It is open as we're talking. We will also devote some time at the end to questions. But sir, please go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted a quick question. You said you doubled your spend on your marketing. What was it before, and what is it now, if you don't mind me asking? And is it a targeted area that you specifically go for? Because I know you said you expanded to New York and Texas.
Yeah, so for us, the marketing I'm talking about is our paid ads, so specifically meta ads. We mostly focus on Facebook and Instagram. Those are still the channels that are performing the best. I haven't heard of any brands that have really mastered TikTok paid ads. We've tried it. There's a lot of click farms, so I wouldn't recommend. The stats that you're going to get are really thrown off. So the area that we're doubling is paid ads through Meta, specifically Instagram and Facebook. Last year, I think we spent around $700,000. We're scaling it up to $1.5 million this year because we're able to reliably scale that channel, acquire customers for less than what they spend on the first order. So within our space, being first order profitable is one of the most important metrics. So now that we figured that out, you have the confidence to really scale up. So whatever channel is working well for you, if it's like events, if it's, I don't know, like going and doing like market events in person, if it's sampling, whatever you find is actually working, I'd recommend scaling that and not taking bigger bets in other areas of the business. And then in terms of the second part of your question of which markets, now that we're scaling spend, we're not being quite as choosy about which markets we're focusing on, so we're able to start expanding out into new regions. A lot of the marketing spend that we do decide to deploy, especially into the US, is in support of the Whole Foods stores, because we want to continue to see sell through there and make it easier for those consumers to purchase the products when they're just doing their groceries.
Great. Good. Thank you so much. And yeah, if anyone else has questions, of course, anytime we will take those as well, and we'll also take some at the end. I want to ask you about hiring as well, Laura, because I think you have a very strategic strategy when it comes to hiring. Can you talk about that and what do you focus on?
Yeah, so for hiring, we honestly don't really look at past background or experience. Some of our worst hires, I'd say that we've made 2 bad hiring decisions, and those decisions were made off of like, who were they working at before they came and worked for us? We're like, oh, this person is from Sephora, like, they're going to be great. And just not the right fit, not the right person. So instead, the only two things that I really care about now are culture fit. Like, are they going to have that mentality that's really going to embed them into the team? Do they have the hustle and drive that it takes to succeed within the beauty space, especially as a startup company? And then the second thing is, have they gone through hard life experiences? One of the questions I've asked during interviews that I absolutely love is, what is the hardest thing you've ever been through in life? Share as much as you're willing to. It can be either personal or on the professional front. In my experience, the people that are willing to be vulnerable and open up, especially in the second round interview with you, is probably going to be a better employee. They're going to have that direct line of communication. They're going to engage more with their team members. We're a remote team by default, so being able to connect with people virtually is really important. It makes it really hard if you're managing someone that is just kind of logs on and logs off and doesn't share anything about their personal life. Those are really challenging people to be able to grow and develop within a remote team. So asking for someone that's been through something really difficult and hard and is willing to share about it is something that I really look for, and I find leads to the best employees. And then, of course, tenure at their past positions. I found that especially, I'm a millennial, so to call ourselves out, we tend to be very impatient. And so people that are jumping around from job to job every 18 to 24 months, that to me is a red flag. I don't really hire those people anymore. I would much rather hire someone who's worked at Cobb's Bread for 8 years and has grown their position there, or has worked at Shoppers for 5 years and has grown their position within that team, and has a sense of passion for our space, and is also a very thoughtful, intelligent person. That to me is usually a better indicator of success than what school they went to or where they worked at previously.
It's interesting because we talk so much about culture, right, and how do you get culture, but it sounds like you found a few points, especially in the interview process, a few questions that are specific enough to kind of answer that for you, of how, if this person is a fit or not.
Yeah, and you're never going to get it right 100% of the time. Some people interview incredibly well, and then when it actually comes to the job, maybe they're not as great at it as you thought. But agility for learning, agility for opening up and connecting with other people, passion about the space, loyalty, those things tend to matter much more when you're a small, medium-sized business. And I've found that it's almost a detriment to hire people that have big corporate backgrounds sometimes, because they're used to certain budgets, they're used to certain team sizes, they're used to a certain pace that just doesn't translate over to small businesses. Yeah.
And of course, when we're talking about difficult times, often there's not a lot of hiring going on. So
Yes.
I guess, how do you guys gauge that if you're, you need someone, but it's maybe not the right decision at the time? What do you think about?
So in terms of how do we decide which positions to hire for?
When you don't necessarily, you would like to hire for a bunch, but what do you prioritize? Yeah.
So we're lucky in that we're actually growing quite quickly right now, so we are hiring quite a bit. If I were in the mindset of being okay, we're not growing very fast, what positions do I focus on? I would focus on the revenue driving positions. So someone that's a really adept marketer that has that grit and determination and hustle. Someone that's just an action oriented person, probably wouldn't hire very many managers. You need people that are doing the work and executing and coming up with the content. Content is huge these days. So I'd probably focus more on someone that does social media content, is an ad strategist within our space, someone that's actually willing to be the boots on the ground rather than the people that are the strategic, oh, our P&L should look like this. Those are very flashy roles, but probably not the ones I would focus on. Instead, I would bring on those roles as freelancers. It's great to use contractors for those types of positions. Fractional CFOs, fractional COOs, those are great types of hires to make during this period of time that you may not have budget to bring on a full-time experienced CFO, but you probably have the budget to work with them one day out of the week, and maybe that's all that you actually need to put some of these processes in place. So I would say don't get caught up in the mindset that you need to have a fully fledged management, executive team. It's much better to have the people that are executing.
And use contract workers if you can to your
For those
advantage.
specialized skills, probably better to hire specialized generalists, I would call them, that they're they're very generally good at making content, but not someone maybe that's I only write SEO. That's probably something that's better to outsource.
Yeah. And can you just give us a sense of the size of your team right now? And I guess, how quickly had you been growing for the last few years?
Yeah, so last year we're up 100% year over year. The year before that, I think we had also doubled. So this year we're forecasting $10 million in revenue. So we're definitely still an entry-level point within the business. but we've been growing very quickly since our launch 3 years ago. For team size, we're at 15 team members full-time right now, and then for contractors, freelancers, which again we rely on a lot because oftentimes we don't need full-time people within certain roles, we have around a dozen of those. Yeah.
Kind of continuing on, we started talking about finances, we went to hiring a little bit, but let's come back to finances in sunk costs specifically, which you were talking about a little bit before when we were chatting. I guess how do you limit that, or what do you decide to prioritize your spending on when times are tough?
So again, I would focus on areas that drive revenue and growth. So for us, the area that we're really investing into this year is our digital marketing. That's where we've seen the results. Also product innovation, because so much of beauty is newness. That's what you get covered in within PR. It's the same within the fashion space, same within tech. Innovation is really important. So if you were going to invest in something that's more of a sunk cost, probably product innovation where it makes sense and rounding out your assortment is a good place to do it. And then anything that really supports a customer and has them coming back over and over again. Ultimately within e-commerce, where you make the money is repeat purchases. Most brands break even at best on first orders. So we are choosing to invest in like a retention marketer this year, for example. Right now, that's an outsourced position for email marketing, which is a form of retention. We're going to be bringing that in-house. So those are the types of positions that we're focused on, less focused on like growing out support operations, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned innovation, which I want to ask you about, because innovation can be sometimes really difficult when you're in tight times, because often it requires a lot of funds and a lot of energy. So how do you think about innovation, I guess, in terms of what you would prioritize, or what do you focus on when you don't have the ability to do everything?
To do everything, yeah. And within innovation, you probably shouldn't do everything anyways, because it takes so much to support each launch. And each launch, we find, at least within the skincare space, if you're launching a product a month, it kind of devalues each launch because people just get tired of it. And realistically, they can also only have so many steps within their routine before they're like, I don't need another like cream. I already used 2 of yours. So for us, where we found makes the most sense is actually involving our customers within this process. We're constantly talking to them, asking, what do you want to see from us? What product should we launch and innovate on next? What sort of actives are you really interested in? What ingredients do you look for when you're buying certain skincare products? And that's done really well for us, is to involve our consumer in that process. Another form of transparency that we really embody is that we actually send out our lab samples, so before the product's actually even been launched, to our customers. We call this our pre-production sample testing group. So 50 of them will get this product to try. They'll try it for 2 weeks. It's in a consumer perception study setting, so we'll give them very specific instructions they have to follow. They have touch bases at the start and at the end. They have to send progress pictures in order to continue to participate in these things. And that, again, is another way of keeping your customers involved in the journey. And then we get some amazing stats that we can also market as consumer perception study at the end, while getting some amazing insight from our customers. Okay. So yeah, I'd focus on areas that your customers are demanding, being like, we really desperately need this. If you have like a backpack brand and they're asking for you to launch a certain style in blue, maybe prioritize that over launching like a crossbody bag if that's what they're really demanding for. If you keep seeing the same insight come up over and over and over again, that's where I would prioritize your R&D time.
Okay. And I want to ask you about listening to your customers too. We'll just throw it out for any questions because we do want to have this as interactive as possible. If anyone has a question, just shoot your hand up. I specifically, okay, you know what, we'll go back here.
Hey, thank you. You mentioned it earlier with the internal operation, you do a weekly kind of anonymous questions in regards to the team.
Sorry, I think can you just speak up a little bit?
Yeah, sorry.
Closer to the mic?
You mentioned earlier in regards to the internal operation how you do questionnaires with the team, anonymous ones. What are they open-ended? How do you digest that feedback and make effective kind of choices moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Just in case anyone didn't hear it, so it's about kind of questionnaires to the team, right, and feedback from the team, and how do you do that?
Yeah, great question. So they're a mix of open-ended and like selection bubble questions, where it's like scale of 1 to 7, where would you rank? So some of the questions we ask, like, I feel like I am close to my manager and like comfortable with them, scale 1 to 7. I feel excited about the direction that 3 Ships is going in. I feel Like, I know the next steps of my career. They're worded, of course, very differently than this, but this is very broadly how we would ask them. We put on a scale of 1 to 7 very intentionally, because scale of 1 to 10, everyone's kind of like, oh, I can't put, like, I'm more of a 7-8 person, or I'm a 9-10 person. Like, people already have like a bias for it. Makes it also really easy to do the math on 1 to 10s about where you kind of fall. People are used to being graded in that way, so 1 to 7 makes it a little bit harder for people. And
That's
we
such
find
an
that
interesting little detail that you changed it up, so people have to think about it a little bit more.
It was something that was recommended to us by one of our mentors, and we find that we get more honest feedback that way from people by using 1 to 7. Like, you'll actually see some 4s and 5s, which is what you want. You want to pull out those insights. You don't want everyone giving you 9s and 10s all the time. That's probably not very honest. And then some of the open-ended questions will be things like, what could make them feel happier? What would, if they were to leave, what would be the reason for them leaving? That's a really helpful question to ask. Would they recommend 3 ships to a friend? Like, if not, why wouldn't they? Do they have any suggestions of ways that we can improve? Another thing that we do, because our team is on the smaller end, like, just over a dozen people, we do these quarterly offsites. So instead of the budget going towards a dedicated office space, we invest that time into going away together for a full week. We rent out like a cottage or go up to like a hotel or resort somewhere up north, and we spend a lot of dedicated time together working on the business rather than in it. It can be hard in the rush of the day-to-day, like the past speaker was talking about the number of meetings that everyone has, and I think every organization suffers from this. So pulling everyone out of their regular environment, spending some dedicated time, even if it's just like a full day together that you rent out a space or a boardroom somewhere in the city once every 2 weeks, that time is really valuable. And ever since we started doing those, we have found that those employee satisfaction surveys that we talk about have gone up. Yeah.
I wonder, I don't know if there's something specific maybe that you found from those surveys, just if there's a more specific example, I wonder, just to really illustrate, what you can get from a specific survey like that, and actually then implement the change and hopefully, better the culture or better the experience for the employees as a result.
A lot of it is on a very individualized basis. So sometimes the most helpful insights for me to pull as a founder is on if we've recently promoted someone up to a managerial role, or they just got their first direct report, seeing how their direct report rates them. Because then I can have that direct conversation. That's probably the most helpful insights of being like, okay, this person's direct report doesn't really know where their career is headed at 3 ships, or doesn't understand the feedback that they've been given. Now it's probably time for me to provide coaching to that manager. And that's probably not something that I would have purview over as a founder otherwise, because I'm not interacting with those people directly, and I shouldn't really be like involved in their performance conversations or their one-on-ones every week. That wouldn't be very efficient. So that's been like a really helpful instance that I can point to. I don't know that there's any others that come to mind immediately, to be honest.
But that's something that that you have recognized. Then
Yeah,
from
exactly.
That kind of survey questionnaire. Okay. Great, thank you for the question. I will just do a quick survey of the room, see if there's any other questions. If not, I'm going to ask you about product launch, because you recently said you're gearing up for a new product launch, and I would imagine launching a product in more difficult times has got to be different than in rosy times. So maybe you could just kind of talk us through that experience and what you have noticed or what you change as a result.
So for us, because the US market is doing so well, a lot of our launch budget for this launch is focused on the US market, because that's where we find people are buying, that's where they're shopping. So again, kind of underscores the importance of exporting and having that as a big channel within your company. So that's one difference that I would highlight. Another one is that we focus more on the quality of the product and how long it will outlast you, the results it's going to deliver. Of course, we always focus on the results, but like longevity, quality. The next product that we're launching is an eye cream, which our community is going to be really excited for once we do launch it, because it's our first time. So our whole tagline for that campaign is the eye cream you won't want to break up with, because eye creams are one of the most traded out products within skincare. No one actually loves their eye cream. Every time that they go to the store, they're buying a new one. So this was an insight that we gleaned from Reddit. Reddit's a great spot to go and find market research about like it's a great spot of like, what are the questions that keep coming up on Reddit? What is nobody happy with? What are some of the like just trending questions? There's a lot of insights you can pull from Reddit. And so we're like, okay, if this is the problem, let's focus our messaging around that this is the last eye cream that you're ever going to want to buy. Like, break up with your other eye creams, comes in at a great price point. So we really focus on quality during that period of time. Less so value, more about quality.
Okay. I'm so curious about the Reddit thing. Like, is that something you guys just stumbled on, or is this something that
Within
is known? I don't
skincare,
know.
it's pretty huge. There's a lot of Reddit forums that are massive within skincare. I'm sure it applies to other industries as well, and it's just a great way to have people's, again, like pretty honest, sometimes brutally honest thoughts, and to just see what's trending. Like you'd be surprised by how much you can pull out of Reddit.
I'm seeing some nods over here, so this is something that's, I guess, is through other industries as well. I just see yourself nod here. Is it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, skincare addiction I think has like 3 million people that follow that Reddit forum alone, so it's pretty wild.
Fascinating. So you got to find your specific little niches or where people are talking about it.
Definitely.
I think we have a question back here. Perfect.
Yeah, so I wanted to know, in the US market in particular, have you explored the aggregator marketing other than the direct sales that you guys are planning through Meta, that I understand? Is there any role that you see there, or have you explored and experimented with that side of things when you use other market platforms? Because sometimes it's an easy way of exploring those avenues. Some comment on that?
By aggregator marketing or marketplaces, what do you mean? Like, do you mean Amazon, or do you mean like Walmart and how they?
Yeah, the third-party platforms that you've explored relevant for your particular niche.
So I think it depends on the industry that you're in. Within skincare, distribution is really closely protected. You have to be very intentional about your distribution. It's not always about being in all the distribution touch points as a metric of success, as it is controlling how you distribute, because that says a lot about your brand. And if you make the wrong decisions early on, it can limit you from launching into the larger beauty retailers like Sephora. So for example, if you're like, okay, Walmart reached out to us, we say no to more retailers than we say yes to, like CVS, Rite Aid, Rexall, Loblaws, Walmart, all of them have reached out. We're not carried there very intentionally, because if we were to choose to go down that avenue and go more into mass retail or into drug, that would limit us from being able to launch into the beauty retailers, which are really the areas that we care more about, because that's usually a benchmark of success. That's where you'll see the high velocities. They're easier accounts to support, because there's less retail points of distribution that you have to support and like send reps out into. You can actually send reps out into them. So I'd say marketplaces aren't inherently bad, but make sure that you're making the right decisions about which ones you choose to partner up with according to your industry and your space. Because at least within beauty and skincare, it's a lot about controlling your distribution. Like Amazon, for example, is a marketplace that we are sold on. We don't really focus on it too much. The main reason we're sold on there is because we want to control our price point. We don't want people reselling our product on there. We want to control the listings. So we're set up with their brand registry that we can shut down other listings that aren't us. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I would say just do it in a more measured way instead of going after all marketplaces if you're in an industry that is similar to ours, where retail distribution really matters about how the brand is perceived. If that doesn't really matter too much, then I'd say it doesn't hurt to get set up on them. A lot of dropship platforms are very, very easy to support, very easy to get up and running with.
Well, that answers most of it, but what's been the share for that? Because at the end of the day, when you have a space there, it's actually a digital store that is also putting towards your branding efforts, right?
Yeah.
So it's putting your word out there as well. That's the element to that as well. So what's the share for that, or you just don't consider that as a priority?
We don't really consider marketplaces as a priority. Our Amazon, for example, is around 10% of our direct-to-consumer numbers. But again, we're looking to just maintain that channel. We're not really looking to grow it. So we don't invest heavily into it. It's just to protect the brands, because ultimately we want people to buy through our own website. That's where we control the data, and that data is so valuable for potential acquirers down the road. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like so the brand is really important, and the way you want it perceived. And I would imagine like shipping costs is also a factor in that. So you want to like be very specific about what you're putting your money into.
Yeah, like usually retailers will cover the cost of the shipping, so it's less so about margin protection. Amazon is actually extremely margin dilutive. It's not a great channel to sell in within beauty, at least from a margin standpoint. The fees that they charge are astronomical. I don't actually have a great things to say about Amazon. As a platform, unfortunately, sorry if anyone here is from Amazon, but I would focus more on channels that you own the data, because especially if your goal is to get acquired down the road like ours is, that's usually the end point for skincare beauty companies. having that data is extremely valuable and oftentimes one of the biggest assets that a potential acquirer is actually buying you for. So it's probably better if you're looking at the US, think about ways that you can export to that market. There's lots of shipping companies that allow you to do cross-border shipping to feed directly into the USPS services, so you're not having to pay so much for shipping from Canada down to the States, or get set up with a 3PL in the States. So for us, we have a warehouse of our own in Canada that we use for the Canadian market. That's our main warehouse. And then we have a 3PL that we use that's down in Chicago that handles all of our US orders. So we're not paying a super high amount for a postage, and that works totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have just the last couple of minutes here, so I will do a call out for questions if anyone does have any questions here. Oh, I think we've got another one back here.
I'm a totally open book, so.
Yeah, yeah.
So with doubling down on meta ads, and then with influencers being a big driver of lifestyle brands, what are your thoughts on them, and do you collaborate with influencers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we are scaling up our influencer spend as well. So that's probably the next fastest growing channel for us other than meta ads. For us, though, we found that there's a shift away from big influencer partnerships where you're paying like $5,000 for one post. Influencer rates are honestly becoming so exorbitant that I don't know which brands can afford to pay them other than like the big Estee Lauders. For example, for one feature in a podcast, the going rate is around $40,000 for you to have like a 30-second placement in a podcast.
Yeah, that's not cheap, yeah.
No, it's not cheap. That's a big bet. We don't tend to see conversions from those types of activations when we've tested them in the past. We've never tested one of the $40,000 placements, but even $5,000 to $8,000, we don't tend to see that those actually perform. So what I would focus on instead, if you're looking to break into the influencer space, is more on seeding. Focus on those influencers that are like the nano to micro size, so under 40,000 followers, as low as even 5,000 to 10,000 followers. That have actual engagement and influence with their audience. People aren't following them because they're like, oh, well, everyone follows this person or aspire to be like this person. Find someone that people actually take the advice from, and those people will do really well for you. We don't really ever pay per post anymore. We do that on a very rare occasion. Usually we'll just seed to them, so we send them the product for free. We'll tell them, if you like it, we'd love for you to post about it. We'll set you up with your own code so that you can give your audience 20% off and you get a kickback from those sales. So having more of an affiliate network with these nano influencers works much better. Another thing that's been working really well for us is having influencers create content, and then once we see that that content does really well organically and gets a ton of hits, you boost that content. So you basically pay them to be able to use their creative, and then that's what you put your ad spend behind. You can either boost it from their handle, or you can ask them to send you the content and then run that as a Facebook ad. Those ones work incredibly, incredibly well. Because again, all of your ads now should look native to the platform. Consumers are very smart. They know when they're getting sold to. Everyone knows when something's a hashtag ad. No one really pays attention to those recommendations. So the more organic that collaboration can look or to be, the better.
Really interesting question, yeah. Thank you. I think this is all we have time for. So Laura, thank you so much for being here. That was really interesting.
I'm Dawn Kalea, editor of Report on Business magazine, and I'm looking forward to moderating our next session on digital transformation. By now, most mid-sized enterprises in growth mode have embraced digital transformation to some degree. Tech strategies that were once cutting edge, however, have now become table stakes in numerous sectors. Joining me to discuss the next frontier and how to implement change is Ricardo Costa, Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Purelator. Welcome, Ricardo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you in person. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you're in our virtual audience and would like to pose a question to Ricardo during the last few minutes of our discussion, please submit them in our virtual Q&A box, and we will do our best to get to a couple of them, and we'll also do our best to set aside some time for questions from the audience. But let's get started. So why don't you tell us a little bit to start about your role at Purelator?
So I'm Chief Technology Officer at Purelator. A lot of people ask me, like, why did you go to the transportation industry? From a technology perspective, technology is at the core of logistics right now. It's the disruptive force, so there's a lot of fun stuff for a technologist like me. I'm also responsible for the investment plan for the company, so we're actually delivering through our strategy, so it becomes a very interesting proposition for technology, for moving forward with the company. So that's a little bit of my role there. Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about how consumer expectations and sort of the rise of e-commerce shifted what your company does and sort of your technical needs.
Yeah, so if you think of e-commerce, like everybody has an experience on e-commerce in some form or shape. And we've been talking about for the past 10, 15 years how e-commerce is transforming the world. I think COVID actually accelerated it even more, especially here in Canada. We saw a big difference after COVID. But if you think on how that's shifting our business specifically, just think about your experience. What do you want when you're buying something from Amazon and Canadian Tire or whatever? You want it to be delivered really fast. So you want it to be at your house, like you're buying in the morning, you want it in the afternoon or something like that. So that is something that's becoming way more important now for consumers, also to our clients, so our clients' clients. And the other thing that we're seeing, and for us specifically is a bigger shift, is our competitors changed. So before, when we're like years ago, when you were talking about transportation, you could name 3 or 4 companies that are doing transportation. Now, when you're talking about that, like we're competing with companies that are delivering on a 4-block radius and they're using roller skates to deliver. So it's very different, and depending on where you are in your journey for transformation, it's really difficult to shift and compete with those companies. And sometimes you might not even want to compete, but sometimes you do. So it's e-commerce is driving a lot of that, and a lot of that diversity in or different operating models, different ways of doing the same thing we've been doing for the last 100 years.
Right. So when we spoke in preparation for this session, you mentioned a good starting point when you're talking about using tech to solve problems being to sort of define very clearly what you actually do as a company, which sounds super duper basic, but I find in talking to a lot of small and mid-sized businesses that they can't do that.
Yeah, and my friends from operations usually hate when I say this because I oversimplify. But if you think about what Purelator does, or any delivery company, we do 4 things. We pick up stuff, we move it around, we deliver to somebody, and we charge for it. That's literally what we do. And they get upset with me because there's a lot more than actually a truck stopping on your door and putting a package there. And yes, there's a lot more than that, especially on the move it around. But that's what we do. And when you simplify it like that, for us specifically, is understanding who are we servicing. So I'll take the charge for it out of the picture for a second, the billing part. But we pick up stuff, we move it around, and we deliver it to somebody. The pickup stuff, I'm usually picking up at a hospital or a pharmacy or at a Canadian Tire or Amazon, a retailer, etc. That company is our client, and that company wants us to be on time 99.87% of the time, depending on the SLA, the product they choose, etc., etc. The person receiving the package on your front door, you're not my customer. You're my customer's customer. And you want me to be on time 110% of the time. So when you think of that relationship, you're not paying for the service receiving the package, but you're the one actually measuring the quality of the service. So it's 2 very different experiences and 2 very different expectations. One of our taglines is we deliver promises. And I usually joke, you don't want to piss off a 6-year-old that didn't receive their Christmas gift from grandpa, right? So that's what we deliver, and that's where we move it around comes into play. To deliver those 2 very different experiences, we need to cater also to our frontline employee experience. So again, bringing it down to, we pick up stuff, we move it around, and we deliver it. We're really talking about 3 different experiences and personas that we need to manage. And it's a 3-legged stool. If one of them breaks, the entire experience breaks. So we have a very user-centric approach, focus on those 3 personas.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about some of, what technologies you're using to sort of solve some of those frictions. I think you put it when we spoke earlier.
So again, it's all about the user, right? So we start thinking about what does the frontline employee, and the frontline employee could be the person loading a truck. It could be the person knocking at your door and delivering that, or it could be you having to return your package. So we try to cater the experience for each of them. Technology is at the core, but it's a means to an end. It's not actually the solution. The solution is delivering the package. Technology actually allows for that. So we work through a lot of different things that we try to use to remove those frictions. I'll give you one example on returns, for example. If you think about the last time you had to return something, it's a pain. Like you gotta go to a store and you gotta deliver it and you stand on the customer line to deliver. It's usually the longest line they have in the store and nobody has patience for that, etc. In e-commerce, it's even worse because now you have to find a package. A lot of times, especially if your kids are opening the packages like mine, you can't reuse those packages. So you gotta find a package, you gotta print a label. Most people don't even have printers anymore, or the printer's not working, or I don't have enough whatever. And you have to go somewhere to deliver, to drop that. So it's a horrible experience for the person actually returning. And once you return online, you gotta wait for like 7 business days or 3 weeks or whatever for the company that you bought it from receive the package and actually clear your credit card, et cetera, and give your money back. So the experience is horrible for you, horrible for the shipper, and for us, it's not a great either because who wants to pay for returns? So what we did is we started looking at solutions that can we actually create a package-less return. So instead of actually you putting on a package, just bring it back to us. We'll figure it out. Instead of printing a label, can you come with your phone on a QR code? And when you come to our store with your shoes that you're returning, and we scan the QR code, I have now the link, the label, I can figure that out, and I can return that for you. And can we actually look at what you're returning and clear it directly with the vendor? And we say, you know what, we got the shoes here. The shoes look like they're in the conditions that they're supposed to be. We have the shoes in our possession. You can release the money. So for you as a consumer, it's a better experience. For the company on the other side, it's also a good experience because now we're actually not shipping one-offs. I can actually hold that shoe, and when I have 10, 20, 50 shoes, I return it in a bundle, which reduces their cost. And for us, we're actually moving that without a lot of friction on our side as well. So that's the angle we take on those things. We also have, here in downtown, we have a few. We have what we call kiosks, where you can go in with something you want to ship, and you go on a self-serve kiosk, just like an ATM machine, and you put your package there. It will print a label. You tap your card. You pay for it. The package goes away. You get a receipt, and you're done. So it's trying to remove some of that, oh, you got to be at the store by 5 p.m. or they're going to close the Purolator store, or Staples is going to be closed, and you can't really. We're trying to remove some of that friction. Again, it's thinking about the problems that the user and the customers have, and trying to use technology to enable some of that.
This has made me have a terrible, terrible flashback to last week when my kid was trying to return a fishing rod to Amazon, and it became like a day-long ordeal.
It can
Just
be a
an
hassle.
FYI, it was a
hassle.
nightmare. It was a nightmare, and it was all my fault, of course. When we're talking about digital transformation, I think everybody's mind sort of jumps to artificial intelligence. It's on everybody's tongue these days. So, I think there's this expectation that AI is going to be the thing that solves everything. Inside Purolator, you are using AI, but you want to talk a little bit about how you're using it and, how you sort of figure out how best to direct those efforts.
Sure. Yeah, AI is probably everyone's favorite topic right now. There isn't one CEO in the world that doesn't talk about AI, and a lot of them don't even know what they're talking about. We use AI as a tool. It's not a means to an end. As same principle we talked about, we think of the problems we're trying to solve, and then we tackle, we may use AI to solve. It's a tool in our tool belt that can be used. I think the challenge that most people have with AI today is and I can guarantee you all have a bunch, if you're not one of those vendors, but you all have a bunch of vendors. I have this AI solution for you that's going to be great. I usually joke that very soon somebody's going to come and say, hey, I can give you an AI haircut. And yeah, that could happen, and people can talk about it. But at the end of the day, we try to use AI to solve, again, the problems of the shippers, receivers, and our frontline employees. A few examples, one that we're working through right now and we're really passionate about, because it solves an internal problem and also a consumer problem, is we have a solution to better identify addresses. So if you think about, for example, a Square One, a mall in Mississauga, it's a 1 square mile mall. The address of that mall is 1 City Center Drive. So put yourself on the driver's seat and you have, oh, I got to deliver this package on 1 City Center Drive. that package could be delivered anywhere in that 1 square mile radius. And it's really hard to pinpoint that. So we're actually, through AI, machine learning, et cetera, we're finding, okay, where is the exact location we need to deliver? On a mall, it's easy to see. It's actually a lot easier to do. But let's think of a retirement home, for example. Retirement home is a business and at the same time a residence. So you have people there that, like you have Mr. Smith that wants to receive his book from Amazon, but the business retirement home might be receiving goods to run the business on the back door. So through AI, we're able to actually pinpoint which experience we're servicing. So we know that, you know what, this book is for Mr. Smith. It needs to be there by 10 p.m. It's okay, or 9 p.m., whatever the cutoff is. But this component here is actually a business delivery. It shouldn't go through the same path. It should go through the back door, and you better be there before 5, because if you get there at 5:01, there's nobody to receive. So that, for us, actually allows us to do improve the life of the driver or the person doing the delivery, because they can actually manage that in a better way. And for the customer, it's a much better experience. Mr. Smith might get his book on time instead of having to go through the concierge that goes to the back room, et cetera. This is one example, but you can think about that on universities, hospitals, delivering those places that have one address and a bunch of what we call points of call. That's really important. The other thing that becomes important for us, everybody thinks that Google, Microsoft, and Apple, whoever, they have the best address locations, and they do have like very rich information until you go to a place they don't have rich information. So we have places, especially in rural areas, where the address is like 2 kilometers away from actually where you need to drop the package. And that's a big problem. So through AI, we're solving a lot of those issues and trying to address that. So that's one way to do it. The other one, we use computer vision now, which is another AI technique. When we're loading trucks, the person loading the truck, they need to look at the package and understand this package will go on truck A, shelf 1, and it's going to be the 3rd package. Because when delivering, the driver needs to know, okay, this is the package. You got to make that very efficient. So through computer vision, we actually understand, and AI, we understand what the package is, and we actually project. So we use a little bit of augmented reality. We project on the package the information that the person needs to know. So the loader, he looks at the package like, oh, that's a package I need to pick up, and I know that it's going to a specific place. So those things reduce our cost, makes things a lot easier for our employees, and at the end of the day, it all translates into a better experience to the consumer.
It's interesting that you're looking at what the problem is, right? Like, rather than trying to use the sexy tech, you're looking at what the problem is that you need to solve and finding the right technology to actually solve it.
And one thing that we talked about before, and I didn't bring it up here, is a lot of times it's all about the process and the data you have. I usually say if you have a broken process and you automate a broken process, your end result is an automated broken process. And the difference with an automated broken process is you lose the entire control on it, because now you have a machine or some software actually repeating the same problems you were having before. So that's a key thing for us. It's understanding what is the problem. I joke a lot about the vendors coming in with AI. They usually come with hammers and like, look at my hammer, what problems you have, what nails you have. And it's really hard when you have like a hammer looking for a nail. We usually try to understand, okay, what are the nails that we have, and let's see what hammers. We might need a screwdriver, not a nail at the end of the day.
Right. So what technologies should business owners be keeping an eye on down the road beyond AI?
I'll go on the commonplace, AI for sure. But I think the one thing that we need to be really aware about AI, and I'm sure you all heard AI is great, and it is great, it's transforming the world, but it's not a silver bullet, right? There's a lot of wrapping around some AI solutions, and people are like, oh, we're going to solve all the world's problems with AI. I think eventually it will, but at some point in time, it will be solving a lot of problems. It's solving already, but it's not AI for the sake of AI. You gotta solve a problem for it. And a lot of times it's like easy things. I think like we were chatting about this before, like if you think of a small business, they don't have the budget to actually have an entire marketing group working from them, and you can have AI or a generative AI creating your social media campaigns. That's great. The one thing that on AI today, especially generative AI, that we need to be really aware of is how much it hallucinates actually. Like sometimes it drinks something that we don't know what it is and comes up with stuff that are like, well, this is not actually accurate. So you actually need to check that. You need to validate that. So it's understanding the compromise that you're going to have to check, you're going to have to validate, et cetera. So I think AI is definitely something that we are using today. We see everyone trying to use it, but it's being conscious about how to use it. IoT, Internet of Things as well. I think we have more sensors today than we ever had. Like I can guarantee every single one of you has a sensor on you right now, either through your phone or your watch or whatever. Our trucks all have sensors. Our houses have sensors. So that is a very rich data set right now that you can use and you can harvest. And this is actually real. This is not like future. This is happening now. And I think the one kind of more midterm, I would say, would be on augmented reality. I think that's, some people are like, oh, metaverse and all that. Yeah, there's a lot of like gimmicky there and a lot of buzzwords, et cetera, but that's something that likely will come into play. And for some businesses, as I explained, the augmented reality we do on boxes, that for us, it actually solves a problem. But again, it's augmented reality for the sake of, not for the sake of augmented reality, it's augmented reality to solve real business problems.
We have just 2 minutes left. I think we can take a question if anybody has one. I don't know who I'm supposed to be looking to, but if not, I just want to, how might you be using augmented reality?
How I am
well,
using?
I mean purely,
well,
not you personally.
So a few things that we think about and we look at it is, so from a driver perspective, today we're projecting things on boxes right now. We foresee and we have tests around, they could have actually glasses that they're going to look at a package and they know the package highlights in purple. You pick up the package and you look at the shelf and you know to put that on the shelf. So that for our employees is important. I think we're going to live in a world in the future that is going to be very data-centric. So buildings will have metadata, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things we start thinking about is, how does that integrate on the car experience? So a driver is driving, they're going to see on the GPS where they need to go, but then they look at the building and they're like, oh, that's where I need to go because it blips on them. So that's, for us, those are a few things that we can use augmented reality on the day-to-day. But in office spaces, we've seen some companies using that for collaboration. And it's actually, like, depending on the type of collaboration you need to do, it's game-changing. You get a lot of different people in the room, people in different locations, et cetera. They get into a virtual room and they actually socialize. And it's actually very different than a Teams call or a Zoom call. It's a little bit more fun. So I think there's a lot of applications, but again, it's what problem you're trying to solve.
Right. Well, I think that's about time. Oh, one very quick question, sir. Ish. Can you project?
I will try.
Good.
That's
You're doing
really
it.
good.
Yeah.
Differentiate efficiency from human autonomy in terms of our spirit. What is the balance? Does the balance exist? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
So that is a deep question. I don't know if I have time for that. Yeah. So if I understood the question is, how do you differentiate the human efficiency from artificial intelligence efficiency, et cetera? I think it depends case by case. So I'll give you one example that we're going through right now. We're using generative AI to do French translations. And initially, there was a lot of reactions on the efficiency of it. Because it's like, oh, it's not going to be Quebecois, it's going to be French, and there will be a lot of issues, et cetera, et cetera. We had actually, so at the beginning, it wasn't that efficient. And we actually had to have a lot of human intervention to actually tackle that. Through the process, we will say, let's start teaching the language model to improve that. The translation now is much better than the translation that we had real humans doing before. But the catch is, it's not perfect, and you still need somebody to double check that. So the one thing I talk especially about AI that I'm really passionate about is, a lot of people talk about, oh, it's going to take jobs, et cetera, et cetera. I think it eventually will change jobs. It will make some jobs different. But at the same time, right now, it's actually coexisting with people, co-working with people. I think Microsoft is even calling it, I don't think they're calling it now, Copilot. So it's actually having that working in the same space, so augmenting people's capacity and capabilities. I don't know if I quite answered your question, but that's how I see the world.
That was a tough one for a quick
Yeah.
question. All right, we will have to leave it there, but that was a heck of a question. Also, to the gentleman reading the Financial Post during that was another power move happening in the audience, everybody. That was just amazing. Thank you so much, Ricardo, for joining us today.
Thank you.
For those joining this event virtually, next up is a session on navigating tough leadership challenges using emotional intelligence. For those in the room, we're about to head into peer-to-peer roundtable discussions. Each table will have a moderator to help facilitate today's talk. The goal of these discussions is to workshop top challenges among each other. It's awkward. I hope you all find the next sessions useful. Sorry, I've come to the end of my usefulness for the day. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webcast. I'm Adrian Lee, an editor in the Globe and Mail's opinion section, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for today's Ask Me Anything session with EQ executive and leadership coach and CEO Global Network Ambassador Jamel Lindo. He's a coach, trainer, and speaker with more than a decade of diverse learning and development experience around the practical application of emotional intelligence and mindfulness strategies. Welcome, Jamel.
Thank you so much.
Jamel is going to be here to answer all your questions on how to navigate tough situations at work using emotional intelligence. And we're going to spend about 30 minutes doing that. So if you have any questions at all, leadership challenges that you have that you want to bring to the table and ask Jamel, please submit them to the virtual Q&A box and we'll get those Q's aid. But first, I want to ask Jamel a little bit about himself. So maybe we get started by, I just want to know, tell me a bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess one thing that you might not know about me, I'm a motorcycle enthusiast. So whenever I'm not, at work doing my thing, I do enjoy, getting out there and hitting the road. Not so much right now because it's really cold. Also on the personal side, I'm recently engaged. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So what is it that I do? I essentially help leaders, executive leaders for the most part, CEOs, senior leaders, become better versions of themselves by leveraging the power of emotions. What in the world does that even mean? The simplest way to think about this is realizing the fact that we all are human beings with emotions. And so the reality is we can either understand those emotions and leverage them so that they work for us, or we could ignore them and not understand them, which causes them to work against us. Emotions being the foundational component to human connection, human interaction, to building deep, meaningful relationships, and even performance. So the more deeply we can understand ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, our drivers, our values, and same with others, is really the more that we're going to be able to show up as the best version of ourselves. And that's what I help leaders and people to do.
Establish that. How does that fit into everything?
Very good question. Emotional intelligence is about being smart about emotions. You have emotions, I have emotions. How do we manage that on a day-to-day basis? If I were to simplify that a little bit more, what I would say is emotional intelligence is about people skills. You're a person, I'm a person. Again, how do we deal with and manage that day to day? Now, the interesting thing about this is emotional intelligence is an umbrella term. Most people don't know that refers to many different skills that all tie in to our emotionality. In the model that I use, which is called EQI 2.0, the world's leading model for measuring emotional intelligence, there are 15 different skills. To keep things simple so that we can get to Q&A sooner rather than later, I'll tell you about the main ones. First, self-awareness, your ability to see yourself clearly. Is there a discrepancy between how you see yourself and how others experience you? Do you know what your strengths are? Do you know what your challenges are? Are you aware of what might be preventing you from achieving your success, things that you're actually doing yourself? Then we have empathy, which is your ability to be able to tap into the view and perspective of someone else. Critical to building deep, meaningful relationships, to having scenarios and relationships where people feel valued, seen, understood. We know by the research when people are feeling those things that they're going to perform better, that they're going to be more loyal within our organizations. Then you have stress tolerance and resilience. When things don't go well, how do you handle that? How do you deal with the stress of the unexpected? Are you still able to show up and to perform And then we also have, in addition to all of those things, simply your ability to be, optimistic. So when things go wrong, can you be connected to the reality of what's happening, but still paint an optimistic picture that helps people to get to where they need to go in a constructive way?
Nice. And just to give folks a sense, we have some questions coming in, but maybe we can offer some framing for folks who want to ask questions. What are some of the kinds of challenges that you've worked on that, leaders have brought to you that EQ has helped frame or reframe or solve?
Before I answer that question, I want to give a little bit of a bird's eye view here, right? Ultimately, every single organization is a collection of people working together and collaborating. We can sometimes get distracted by the brand. You see the Nike check and you think that it's, something mystical. You see the McDonald's M, you think it's something mystical. Guess what? Those are just places where people come together and collaborate. So the success of your business is fundamentally about how effectively people can collaborate. When we collaborate well, things move quickly. We can get momentum and speed. When we collaborate poorly, there's a lot of friction. Things don't move as quickly as they need to move. And so what creates that friction are issues with relationships. And the more that we can understand the relationships, is the more that we can remove the friction so that things then begin to move really, really quickly. So then we have to ask the question, what are some things that could potentially go wrong when we talk about relationships, particularly at work? I would imagine that the people on the call are no stranger to that. And helping to resolve those challenges starts with EQ. So when people come to me, what are some of the problems that I solve? Things like people not feeling heard or valued. So developing a sense of empathy so that when you're connecting with someone, they feel like you've actually provided them with the space to communicate what's happening with them, what the problem is, what their unique experience might be. You want to be able to have an ability to ask deep, meaningful questions so that they can then expand on that. You want to be able to paraphrase so that they know that what you heard is what they actually said and what they actually mean. You want to be able to build deep, meaningful relationships. When these things are not happening, it's likely to show up on an EQ assessment. And so active listening is one of the things. Another thing is assertiveness. And so as leaders, we sometimes have to deliver really tough conversations, really tough messages. Our ability to do that without beating around the bush is critical to success, because if we're not clear about feedback and what we need and what we need to change, or even in our ability to be able to delegate to get things off of our plate, we're not going to be able to move the needle forward in the way that we have to. So developing assertiveness so that we can deliver feedback in a clear, concise way is another really popular thing I would say that people usually focus on when it comes to emotional intelligence. But the bedrock, kind of the underlying theme to all of this, is self-awareness. It is the gateway into every EQ skill. You must start with an ability to be able to see yourself clearly. How do you show up? When you enter the room, right? What do people typically think? How do they feel? When you engage with someone, what is the feeling that they experience when they're talking to you and communicating with you? When you leave the room or they leave your space, what space are people typically in? And what is your awareness of the experience that you're creating when you're actively out there leading with others and connecting with them? And so we always start with self-awareness. What are you good at in terms of EQ? Where are some of the friction points? And then we get into the practical steps to begin developing in one or two areas of EQ over a period of time.
Right on. Well, we've got a couple great scenarios that I think we'll dig into right now. So the first one here is anonymous. I have a great performer in sales, but they are killing team morale. 2 people have left because of their uncooperative and pushy behavior. How do I coach my top salesperson into being more of a team player? Is this even possible? And is it worth it?
So this is a really important question. The first thing that you got to ask yourself is this a will or a skill issue? What do I mean by that? Do they want to make a change in their behavior? That's will. Or is it that they do want it, but they don't have the skill in order to make the change? This is critical to start with. You need to know if this is a desire of this person to change. If they don't have a desire to change their behavior and they're not willing to accept the negative impacts of their behavior, then do not invest the time, money, and energy. Don't do it. You're going to end up fighting someone to do something that they don't want to do. And oftentimes as leaders, we think that we're doing something wrong when we exit someone from an organization, but the reality is you're helping them to find a better place for themselves, and you're helping your own organization to thrive. Because when you have a toxic person within an organization, it spreads. It's like a cancer. And so you've already lost 2 people. Think about that. And you're still having that negative impact while they still remain in the seat. So number 1, you've got to give them the opportunity, give them the benefit of the doubt, provide the feedback directly and clearly. Do not beat around the bush about this stuff. Tell them what you're seeing. Tell them the impact that they're having, and then ask questions. Say, hey, are you seeing this? Are you aware of this? Is this something that you're willing to work on? And if you are willing to work on it, then guess what? Now you can look at investing, supporting, coaching, and developing. Part of your question is, how do I do that? Well, I don't really know where you're at as a coach. If you feel like you have the ability to support that person in their behavioral change, then you can go ahead and do that. But if not, I would say bring in a professional who specializes specifically in the area of behavior that you would like this person to shift, and then have them support you with making the change. But I can't emphasize enough, start with finding out, is this a change that they want to make? Let them make the choice. It's not your decision, right? Let them make the choice, and then you support them with whatever choice they make. They want to stay and develop and learn and grow and become a better version of themselves. Fantastic. You're going to support them with the resources. They don't, then you've got to act quickly and begin to exit them from the organization. And it's actually the best thing that you can do for them and for your organization.
Very quickly, a follow-up, just because we already at 50 minutes left. But part of this question is about how this is a top salesperson, arguably the top salesperson. Is there a performance level that justifies a different approach?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is nothing that justifies showing up in a negative way. Like there's not a certain amount of good that I can do that allows me to be an asshole. Now, you also have to think about, well, what's the bar? What's the line? What kind of culture do you want to create? It's not just the sales numbers that are coming in. You have to realize that you're creating behavioral norms. And if they're the top salesperson and they're being rewarded and recognized, the message that you're communicating is it's okay to behave this way. And if it's okay to behave this way, then those behaviors are now trickling down and becoming your cultural norm. And it's incredibly difficult once a set of behaviors, especially negative behaviors, starts to set in to an organizational culture. It is very difficult to shift that. So you think you're winning because they're hitting a sales number, but you're actually losing because your culture is significantly impacted. People are not going to want to stay as long. People are not going to be as loyal, as committed, as engaged. They're not going to perform at their best. We don't perform at our best when we have negative influences all around us. We perform at our best when we're working with people that care about us, that support us, that encourage us. And so it's better to have that performance spread out in a positive environment where it can thrive and build and grow than to have it all narrowed in on that one thing. And the question that you're not asking yourself is, what happens if this person leaves and it has nothing to do with you?
Fair enough.
Then you lose the credibility, which says, hey, we weren't the ones who made the decision, but we can set the standard where other people could come in, show up in a negative way, and then leave on their own accord. So that's also dangerous as well. So no, it is absolutely not worth it. You've got to do the right thing, even though it's the hard thing.
Right. You talked a bit about, being receptive to feedback. And I think this goes into our next question. How do you balance having an open policy to encourage feedback and suggestions with an employee who constantly pushes back on direction, even when it's been explained why we can't or won't do their suggestions?
This is the same thing as what we just talked about, right? This is an employee who is choosing to not be open to making change. So we want to start with empathy and understanding what's the reason why there's so much resistance. Have they had a leader that has done them wrong? Have we done them wrong? Have we failed them on some level as an organization? Is there something that we need to do differently? So we got to ask that question first, because oftentimes when we have an employee who's checked out or disengaged, there's something that we've done to contribute to it. We need to take ownership and accountability and understand if we've made a mistake and then chart the road to making the right change. But if there's nothing really that we've done as an organization, and this is strictly a behavioral or attitude thing, and the person is very clear about the fact that they're not willing to change, now as an organization, you have a decision to make. What kind of culture do you want? How would you like to set the stage? What kind of people do you want to be working at your organization? What kind of team do you want? And it's not enough to simply say it and put it all over the wall, the fancy core values. You have to act in alignment with those values and understand that our people are watching, and they're going to want to know, what is it that our organization values? And when we simply allow that behavior to continue, we're communicating that we value, negative behavior. So again, start with seeking to understand. Always give the benefit of the doubt. Always be on the side of your people, helping them grow, learn, become a better version of themselves. But the moment that they communicate that that's not what they want, it's out of line for you to force them to do what they don't want. Support them, help them to move on so that they can be happier.
Mm-hmm. This is more of a specific question. My managers can't get their employees into the office 3 days a week. I'm sure you're hearing this a lot. This is a hybrid company. What advice do you have for getting people back to work?
Well, why should they be in the office, first of all? What I mean by that is, what is their incentive based on the experience that they have when they're in the office? So when they are in the office, are there opportunities to collaborate? Do their leaders actually come by and say hello and check in with them? Are they having one-on-one regular coaching sessions with their leaders? Is there a reason for them to actually be in the office? What is the discrepancy? If they're feeling like there's literally no difference in their work experience when they're at home versus when they're in the office, well, then we have some sort of a cultural disconnect. Because if you sitting at home can be compared to being in a space with people, with colleagues, with peers, with your leader, we have to understand really what's going on there. So what I would say is, look at the actual experience of what it's like when people come into the office and find ways to enrich that so that it's not a punishment when you come in. There's actually a drive, there's a desire to be in the office, to be a part of the culture, to see your leader, to collaborate face to face.
Part of what I'm sort of hearing from leaders in companies is that, one, they're incentivizing based on, like, here's coffee, here's some snacks, like we're actual perks, right? And there are a lot of folks who say that, hey, we've created the atmosphere that we do want to bring people back. We want to have this. We understand that this is something that people want to have to, like, will need to want, right? So there is that situation where there's not a compelling argument for coming back to work, but what if the atmosphere is there? What if in fact, folks just don't want to come in?
I would question that. If the atmosphere is there, then why don't people want to come in? And so this is where you have to lean into empathy to really understand, because maybe your idea of the right atmosphere is not what people want at all. And so in some way, shape, or form, you might be out of touch. So we've got to ask questions to establish, okay, what would an environment be like that would encourage you to want to be at work? And in what ways might we not be meeting those requirements? The other thing that we have to be aware of is that the market has shifted, the market has changed. And so the employer doesn't have the ability to simply dictate anymore, because if they dictate and say everyone's got to come in, they have so many different options elsewhere. So we also have to question, to what degree do we need to change, adapt, and evolve to the new world instead of forcing people back into a paradigm which is, quite frankly, gone. It's done. I mean, the world of everybody coming into physical office spaces is over. And we know that because of what's happening in the commercial retail space with the offices downtown, right? There's a reason why they're not filling that space. There's a reason why WeWork is going bankrupt. The world is different. It has changed. So we need to also make sure that we adapt our thinking to ask deeper, bigger questions. It's not just about how do we get people in. It's about how do we still create the kind of culture and performance that we want in an environment where people, quite honestly, have the choice to decide whether or not they come in.
Right. We've got 3 questions left, so we'll try to do sort of a bang 2 minutes each. One of the workplace perks for bringing people back to work is bring dogs into the workplace. This next questioner has opened the gateway to such a policy, bringing the dog into the office, but they regret it. How do they navigate reversing it?
That's a really tough one because people love their pets and they love their animals. And so it may not be so much about reversing it. It may be more about modifying it and then finding a compromise or a happy in between, and then adapting to some of the things that maybe you didn't foresee. Because to simply take that away might have a stronger negative impact than to keep it and modify it in a way that works for both employee and employer.
Fair enough. And what are your thoughts on how to reduce employee turnover? Upping salaries in this particular case is not an option. So what else helps?
You'd be amazed at the number of people who don't feel like their direct leader really cares about them. The number of people who go under the radar because no one's checking in, no one knows why they do what they do, why they even show up when that alarm clock goes off, why they get out of bed and get to work, whether it's in person or virtual. And so to answer that question, you've got to go to the core of the relationship. How are we going about building deep, meaningful relationships? And how are we ensuring that the impact that we have on people is not just benefiting them in their role, but it's benefiting them in their lives? And so we have to think about the person more holistically, and we have to think about our impact on them as more holistically, because ultimately they may not be at your organization for their entire life. But what if you were so invested in them as people that you wanted them to not only be a better version of themselves here in the organization where they're currently at, but you want for them to be successful even beyond your organization? And I think that that mindset is key to making a change there.
Practically speaking, what does that look like? How do you develop that kind of relationship?
The most practical way is about creating space. Meet with people on a regular basis and don't move your one-on-one sessions. So many times we make the commitment, we say we're going to meet with our people regularly, and then we keep moving them around, and now we're sending the message that you're actually not a priority. I'm telling you are, but it's not the truth. So number one, practical thing, regular one-on-one meetings that you do not move. Number two, you need to ask people specifically, why are they there? Why do they show up? Is it just about the money? Right? Which is okay, but we need to know that. Because if it is about the money, the raise is going to matter a lot more. But if it's about career development and having diverse experiences, the raise might not matter as much, but the opportunity to do another role that's going to complement them and allow them to develop in a specific area is probably going to be more valuable. Maybe it's family, and for them, they want a certain kind of flexibility so that they can both do their job and show up for their family. So why are they there? Do they want to grow and progress in the organization, or is it about something else? Have those conversations, and then wherever possible, support them in their career goals via shadowing different departments or different people, getting them connections to people that are very closely aligned with where they want to go in the organization, and really making an effort to find ways to invest in people and in their path. So it starts there. But if I were to say something more fundamental, maybe not as hard, but more fundamental, is you need to actually care about people. You're not going to do any of those things if you don't actually care. So you got to check yourself on that one. As long as you care, then you can follow those other steps, which are one-on-one sessions and ask questions to figure out their why.
Right. And then last question, we're just going to squeeze this last one in. How can you tell if you are surrounded by yes people, and how do you shift that behavior?
Because nobody says no. Nobody challenges you. Nobody gives you feedback. No one tells you if they think that they have a better idea. If everyone is agreeing with you all the time, then you know for sure that you have a yes culture. If you have a yes culture, you got to check yourself first. How have you conditioned people to not share opinions and views that differ from your own? How do you show up when someone disagrees with you? How do you show up when people ask for feedback? Now you want to know, how do we shift that? How do we change that? Well, it starts with creating space for others to share. And when other viewpoints or perspectives come in that are different from yours, instead of responding with some sort of defense, you want to lean into it, create space, ask questions, seek to understand. And at the end of those discussions, let the best idea win. Not your idea, unless your idea is the best idea. Let the best idea win and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be able to contribute. So for those leaders, what you need to do is take a step back, allow others to step in, shut up. It's hard for us to do, me too, as you can tell. Listen, ask questions, and that'll get you to where you want to be.
Nice. That's music to the ears of an editor in the opinion section, so I appreciate that. Jamel, that was fantastic, but it looks like that's all the time we have for. Thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you to our virtual audience for asking some great questions. Coming up next is our closing keynote with Canadian historian and author Lawrence B. Musio. So I'll throw things back over to the main stage before that talk gets underway. So thanks again, folks, and enjoy the rest of the program.
You can see there's lots of discussion going on right now, which is great, but I must ask that we turn our attention back up to the stage here, just as we're about to get ready for our last session of the day. My name is Fiona Colley. I'm Program Manager of Business and Financial Excuse me, I don't even know my own title, apparently. My name is Fiona Colley, and I'm Program Manager of Business and Financial Products here at the Globe and Mail. And I'm looking forward to introducing today's closing keynote speaker. Lawrence Musio is one of North America's most senior business historians whose career has connected decision makers to a deeper understanding of the evolving nature of business and public policy. A working scholar and senior advisor to C-suite executives, Lawrence publishes and advises on the evolution of financial institutions, government policy, and regulation. He is chair and co-founder of the Long Run Institute, an independent, not-for-profit organization that operates across the North Atlantic world. The Institute was established with the mission of generating actionable insights for select senior decision makers in government and enterprise, linking critical historical experience to a widening spectrum of contemporary grand challenges, including risk, technology transformation, and globalization. Today, Lawrence joins us for a talk examining how leaders can build a resilience map in today's business landscape. Please give a warm welcome to Lawrence Musio.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Fiona. It's a great pleasure to speak to you today, and welcome to those who are here and those who are joining Aldesco. Mid-market conferences are rare enough. Partly because you're too busy actually running businesses, and partly because it really has to be worth your time. So I've really kind of tried to keep that in mind. But I do have to tell a little story that happened on the way here. I was scrolling Twitter, and I found out that Phil Collins is 73 years old today. So I told my cab driver, who asked me whether Mr. Collins was the person I was meeting today. So we start off studying history, and then we end up being history, I guess. I don't know. But history is kind of a little bit of the theme of my talk today. A big part of what I do as an historian, as the chair of the Long Run Institute, is to connect senior leaders facing geopolitical and economic challenges to insights from applied history. So it's kind of about pattern recognition, business technology, what Fiona said in the introduction. And that's what I'd like to do today, to link you as leaders to how current challenges connected to what I'd say deeper context can give you some insight on how business culture can adapt to a new era of volatility, risk, and uncertainty, and also creative opportunity. Because I think in these times, as in certain previous times, the number one job of leaders is building an anti-fragility strategy to what's here and what's coming. And so in the next 2 hours, in the next 20 minutes, I know it's the end of the day, right? I'm going to give you a sketch of what I think the challenges and patterns are, and more to the point, maybe, to offer some fundamentals on how to build an anti-fragility strategy based on the long-run experience, based on the applied history experience, what's happening now and what might happen later. And to me, creating that strategy is as important in the long run as what you think the Bank of Canada or the Fed Reserve will do in 3 months. Okay, Let's get started with the challenges. I'm sure you've heard many of the challenges today, but the WEF Global Risk Report released a few days ago predicted that within 2 years, the chance of something stormy, that's very, very bad, or turbulent, just very bad, is about 30%, but rising to 63% in 10 years. I don't know where they get these numbers, but it sounds pretty scary. Some of the greatest, literally, hits include rapid technological change, economic uncertainty, climate change, geopolitical conflict, and the nightmares that made it to the 2024 podium this year are mis- and disinformation, that's only one, extreme weather events, and societal polarization. And I would say, as Canadians, we've also discovered in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, that tough and complicated global times means that whether you're public or private, decisions are harder, missing the boat is easier, unforced errors cut deeper, catching up can be slower, the stakes are higher, and we can always sink lower. Okay, so far so depressing, but wait, there is more because there's a local angle to it as well. The specific concerns of mid-market leaders in Canada are much more direct and immediate. Economic pressures, high borrowing cost, I heard the competition with AI, the war for talent. And so we're also, it's not only those things, but it's the combination of those things. Those individual forces, the uncertain economic prospects, high public deficits, higher taxation, rising interest rates. Okay, we'll throw in the CEBA repayment as well, has to be in there, even though it's in the rearview mirror, kind of. So everything, everywhere, all at once is not just a movie. And what makes it even more, let's say, visceral, is that many of you have personal and business finances at stake. Okay? There's one thing that a good friend and senior executive told me about mid-market leaders, and it's not about resilience so much as it is about culture. Our Canadian DNA, she suggested, is to always go darker, fast, and stay darker longer. And this morning's, reading the Globe this morning, of course the Globe, the PwC survey of CEOs seems to bear that out. A third of CEOs doubt their company's viability in the next decade. Now, I have to stop here and say that those in the room, that the windows are sealed, so you can't jump out of them, but there is a nice balcony. But those at home can unplug your computers, perhaps, I suppose. It does seem a little bit depressing. So let me offer you a couple of things. One is an observation, and the other is a way to confront these challenges, or at least help. Throughout the last several years, businesses have demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt and remain optimistic for the future. We have seen business owners adapting by recalibrating their business models, by using innovations such as contactless delivery and health-focused tech, virtual collaboration, and whatnot. The last few years have had their share of bad news, but also stories of really remarkable resilience. It's, of course, pretty clear that these times do require an anti-fragility strategy, and that's what I'm here to talk about next. The record shows that if leaders can internalize the lessons of the past and proactively prepare for future uncertainties, their businesses can not only weather storms, but also emerge stronger, more innovative, more competitive. And so the companies and leaders in the past faced similar challenges to today, and they overcame them. How did they do that? They started off with having a very clear sense of why they exist as a company and what they do, and they stay laser focused on that. In volatile times, you pick your lane, you stay in it, and focus your passions. Distraction is danger. Think of yourself driving 100 kilometers an hour on the Trans-Canada Highway. This is a very pan-Canadian example. If you're distracted for 20 seconds, you've missed over half a kilometer. And your businesses, metaphorically at least, are traveling at least that speed every day, if not faster. So distracting from focus means missing stuff. All right. So I would see 3 lessons from the past that mid-market leaders can learn in generating your own anti-fragility strategy. I've taken a few examples from across all kinds of business, and of course, one size does not fit all, but it'll be enough to get you thinking, maybe linking past experience to your current challenges. So I've got 3 lessons to talk about. The first lesson is to adapt. Businesses that thrived during turbulent periods in the last century were those that adapted proactively to changes. You look at the Great Depression, for example, companies like Procter & Gamble and Chevrolet pivoted their strategies, investing in advertising and innovating with new product lines. Now, these moves at the time seemed counterintuitive, they would have another word for it, during an economic downturn, but resulted in increased market share and long-term success. The question is, what does adaptability mean in your context? Now think about it for a moment. Okay, the moment's over. I've only got another 10 minutes, right? So in today's volatile market, SMEs should embrace a similar mindset, seeking opportunities amidst adversity and being willing to pivot strategies rapidly in response to changing market conditions. So that's one. Second is to be fiscally prudent. I don't think you need me to tell you that, but financial resilience is foundational to anti-fragility, as evidenced by businesses that weather past economic storms. Those of you young enough to remember the 2008 financial crisis, I can't believe I just said that, the enterprises that had diversified revenue streams and maintained conservative debt levels were better positioned to navigate the downturn. And this is why people fell in love with Canadian banks for a certain limited period. Okay? They were known for their conservative lending practices and emerged relatively unscathed compared to their international peers. And the lesson, I think, for mid-market leaders is that to manage debt cautiously, diversify income sources, maintain liquidity to buffer against market volatilities. And this is especially true as in Canada, we have an aging population, an energy transition, somewhat of a deglobalization as well, that will all put pressure on business costs. So cost mitigation, or whatever euphemism you want to use, is the order of the day. The third lesson is to seek and develop talent. Businesses that invest in their workforce's adaptability and skills resilience are better equipped to navigate uncertainties. And here again, during the 2008 recession, firms that invested in employee training and development instead of resorting, let's say, to mass layoffs, often rebounded stronger. So this approach not only retained talent, but also fostered a culture of loyalty and innovation. And I know that's a really kind of a heavy lift in these times, but I also know that recruitment and retention is a big problem. In fact, it's been called the problem of the decade for SMEs in Canada, so this one is a key one. I'd be remiss not to say something about AI, everybody does. And I very much believe that generative AI will be a serious game changer in confronting inefficiencies and driving reinvention, but that might be a topic for another time. Yet it relates to all of the 3 factors that I'm talking about. Now, these 3 points are not a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a framework to be tailored to the unique challenges and opportunities of each enterprise. Anyone who knows the leaders at this conference today and those who are dialed in knows that it takes a lot of courage to do exactly what you're doing. You're an entrepreneur. You're not part of a big club, a big business, a big public service. So you're releasing that ingenuity, you're focusing it, you should remind yourself of what made you successful in the first place. And I think that's important, even in a time of scarcity. So if you're a big corporate CEO, you will take bets that are totally different than the ones you're willing to take as mid-market leaders. It's a choice that many people continue to make to go into business for themselves, to quit corporate jobs, and to strike out independently as business owners. And many are still making those choices all the time to unleash creative potential and exploit new opportunities. We also see from today's CEO survey that I mentioned earlier that Canadians are starting to turn, even in the mid-market, to the adoption of AI and innovative management strategies, viewing these technologies as crucial for business transformation and longevity. That's what ChatGPT told me anyway. What the track record, the long-run experience of Canadian mid-market leadership up and down the decades has shown is that there is an important, tangible record of performance and accomplishment. You only have to kind of take a step back and see that. How do we know this? Over the long run, SMEs are responsible for 2/5 of Canadian exports, 10 million jobs, and over half of GDP. And it didn't happen by accident. Suffice it to say that you are vital to the future viability and prosperity of this country as much as you have been a part of building it up to now. Leaders can start building an anti-fragility strategy from the usual mix of market data and quantitative information, but then I suggest something to you. Consider it against the long-run experience. Get a pattern recognition for your company or your sector, both of the firm and drawn from broader cases. Now, of course, ultimately, as it always does, it always comes down to your call about how to proceed that will make the difference. Let me leave you with a final thought. It's true that we're living in a new era of volatility. It's pretty obvious. But let's go back for a moment to where the modern world kind of really began. See if we can learn something. In the original Industrial Revolution beginning in the 1750s, technological and societal transformations took a long time to really make a positive difference to the wealth of nations. Things really started to move not when the thinkers or inventors got thinking or inventing, but rather when the doers got doing. The independent artisans and entrepreneurs, the engineers and mechanics, the human capital that made it all tick. So many of the great clock and instrument makers of the age, and this is a central group in the realization of the Industrial Revolution, were self-employed. They depended on their reputation for quality and reliability to progress. In other words, we're looking, at least in part, at an 18th century version of mid-market leadership. And what's more, the story of the Industrial Revolution was not really a national one, but a local one. It was local resources, including talent, that powered the astounding economic performance and comparative advantage that came with the power they unleashed in the North Atlantic world. And that, to me, sounds a lot like what the mid-market does today. Yes, of course it's different. You're not clockmakers, but the parallels are there. The details are different, the patterns are similar. That's the whole point. And for those entrepreneurs of the 1700s and 1800s, the Industrial Revolution happened, or coincided at least, with their own pretty nasty era of volatility. Between the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, a ton of smallpox epidemics, and they also did it without what they call air conditioning, and cars, and no internet, not even a telegraph, up until 1844. And also with an average life expectancy in 1800 of 39.37 years. So I just make it, but I don't know about you. Think of how many of us would not be here. Be quiet. And then, okay, all right, I'd be dead. But what the Industrial Revolution story tells me, and what I think it should tell you, are three things. First, eras of volatility can also be periods of opportunity. Second, building something to last takes time. You know that better than I do, probably. And getting used to this era will also take time, and it doesn't mean you can't have fun. Third, in spite of all our challenges, there are tremendous opportunities for Canadian mid-market leaders as we enter another period of transformation in technology, trade, and globalization to harness your entrepreneurial spirit. And it's for your own success, but it's also for the success of the country. Let's not kid ourselves. All of those three things are needed and sorely needed today. An anti-fragility strategy and culture will give you a shot at not only surviving 3 to 5 years, but prospering thereafter when the waves start to break your way. Protect, maintain, transform. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what I see in recognizing the patterns of the past in business and economics today. That past also points to a present and future need, like I said, for adaptability, financial prudence, and investment in human capital. And that's how I propose how mid-market leaders in Canada in this year and to the rest of the decade can survive the waves, maybe ride the waves a little bit, maybe rule the waves as well. And that's what businesses in this country and in the North Atlantic world have done for 200 years. Canadian business people have been at every point on fortune's wheel, up, down, sideways, also sometimes upside down, okay? But their long-run success and yours means we have a country to show for it, a past worth understanding and learning from, a present worth safeguarding, and a future worth seizing. I believe that. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to take my Coke now. I'll take a question or two, sure. Okay, good. Thank you. Please, a comment would be good.
Start your business. No guts, no glory.
Yes. Okay.
No guts, no glory.
Right. You must have guts. There are plenty of guts in this room. Right?
No guts, no glory.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the kind of and what you're speaking about is the entrepreneurial spirit. So it's like sometimes it's an accident, sometimes it's will, circumstance, personality, all of those things that combine, right? Right? Because you don't want to be the bossed around, so you're going to go into business for yourself, something like that. And that spirit has animated. I mean, studying Canadian business for over 200 years. I haven't studied it for 200 years, but I've studied it for a very short, relatively period to that. But yeah, exactly. But that's what strikes me, and the story of Canada as well is that it's a lot harder, like it's harder scratching than other places, right? So just remind yourself of that a little bit. Maybe we've lost that a little bit in the last 10 years with zero interest rates, et cetera. But I will tell you that Canadian business people are a tough breed. No guts, no glory. I like that. Yes, fantastic.
You leave us on an optimistic note, which is truly most excellent. But notwithstanding, these are troubled times.
Yes.
Is our political leadership up to the task in terms of ameliorating what could be extremely combustive?
Well, I think governments come in cycles, I suppose. I think it's a very, very tough time for public policy. Okay, and I think that they've got a secular set of really, really tough challenges that require maybe an extraordinary kind of insight into current problems, and not simply simply spending, right? So I would say, I want to be diplomatic, but I think that we can't leave the country, so we're going to have to try to make the best of it. And I think people are actually trying various ways to to ameliorate the situation. I think a lot more can be done. I think a lot more can be done, especially helping small and medium-sized businesses. And I think that we've gotten maybe into a bit of a rut. But before that, before it becomes a campaign trail, I'll just say that it is across the board and across the North Atlantic world, public leaders are struggling. I think they're struggling with populism. They're struggling with their own, let's say, looking at older problems, looking at new problems and seeing reflections of the older ones, and then acting on those, and then maybe not being disappointed at the results. But the thing that concerns me the most about this country is the productivity, and the fact that the OECD puts us last over the long run, and that has to change. But Canadians will do the right thing after every other option has been tried. So we're just waiting for it. Okay.
I'll give you the answer for that political question. The political leadership of Canada is ready for the future. I'm not worried about the OECD, but Canada is ready for the future. We can take it on head on. There are political leaders in the country who are technologically capable of addressing everything in this country. I don't care about the OECD. Thank you.
But the OECD cares about you, but you don't care about the OECD. And that kind of optimism, I think, is important. Okay, and I think the change is going to come through this room. It's going to come through the entrepreneurial spirit. Okay, and yes, Canada's been a public-private partnership for 200 years. So if one falls behind, the other has to pick up. It's always been a partnership. So that's what I've been trying to get at. People are frustrated, you know that. But at the same time, I think together, I like your message. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, for that thought-provoking talk. And as well, always good to remember how important it is to learn from history and to appreciate modern medicine. But that's also what I was taking from that. So that concludes our event. I would like to thank all of our excellent speakers for the candid advice they've shared today, and our audience for taking time out of their day to attend and participate in today's event. On behalf of the Globe and Mail, I'd like to thank MNP for making the Business Owners Summit possible. The programming might be done, but we still do have a networking reception. I'd like to invite all of you to stay and enjoy a drink and some snacks. Thank you very much.